A young man in glowing armor looks up at a massive purple dragon, sighing as he realizes the creature is serious about fighting. He observes a vast swarm of dragons filling the sky, recognizing their strategy of using overwhelming numbers against a single human. With a snap of his fingers, he decides to welcome the challenge. In response, a colossal stone hand, crackling with blue energy, forms in the air behind him. He glances back at his creation with a confident smirk and says, "Let's go." The full form of the gigantic golem is revealed, a being of stone and light named Orchestrian, the barrage Iron Man. The narrative shifts to 15 years prior. The Demon Queen's beauty and power were so immense that she unleashed several calamities upon the world. Her unique skill, His Majesty's authority, allowed her to dominate any man, regardless of their race, a power to which even the Demon King was not immune. After the Demon King's subjugation force returned, the world, faced with an overwhelming power that none could stop, established numerous special privileges and regulations as a countermeasure. Now that the Demon King has finally been defeated, only those special privileges remain. The history of that time tells of an era when no one even considered how to handle these lingering regulations. The scene changes to a hall within the castle of the Tyrant Kingdom, where the king addresses his court. Suddenly, a prominent nobleman's voice cuts through the proceedings, his face twisted in a furious shout as he declares, "You're all fired." He gestures dismissively at a group of anxious-looking people, proclaiming that the royal court should, by right, only be staffed by chosen nobles and those of superior birth. He continues his tirade before the assembled commoners, declaring that the World Conference has forbidden the employment of their kind. He proclaims that the ridiculous special privileges they enjoyed were only in place because the Demon King had not yet been subjugated. As a hand raises to object, he bellows that they have no right to be there and orders them to leave at once, demanding to know if they have questions. The noble turns, annoyed, as Holless calmly asks what arrangements should be made for the handover of his duties. He points an accusatory finger, questioning if Holless dares to defy him, the head of the Duke's house. He warns that if there is no handover, Holless will be the one in trouble. He waves a dismissive hand, silencing any further argument. He lectures that commoners are only capable of maintaining what already exists and have nothing to teach the nobility, flatly refusing to hear another word on the matter. He points towards the exit, stating that the World Conference has decreed he is not to interfere with their dismissal. He gives his final order, "Gather your things and get out." His expression hardens with resolve. Holless states that a handover is unnecessary and that he will gather his belongings and leave. He calmly says, "Understood." He offers a formal bow to the fuming noble, thanking him for his patronage. Stating that he is a busy man, he announces he will take his leave. As he walks away through the crowd of dismissed workers, his composure finally cracks. He clenches his fist tightly, his knuckles whitening with suppressed rage as someone mutters for the nuisance to get out of the way. He continues on, lost in thought. He realizes the noble truly believes that problems are solved merely by giving orders, completely failing to grasp the importance of a proper handover of duties. He stood with a look of weary annoyance, snapping his fingers with a sharp crack. The air around him shimmered, as if dispelling a lingering energy. In the wake of his gesture, the scattered documents and debris that had littered the grand hall floor vanished completely, leaving the polished tiles immaculate. He then revealed a small, crystalline object in his hand, an item box. It pulsed with light, creating a swirling vortex that swiftly absorbed every last stray object in the room. With the chamber now empty and silent, he turned his back on the hall and walked resolutely toward the massive, open doors leading out. His departure was tinged with frustration. He scratched his head, thinking it was a shame that his golem operation experiments were now over. He lamented that since his special authority as a royal retainer was gone, he could no longer use the antenna. He continued down a long, stone corridor, lost in thought. He considered his work, acknowledging that an operational range of 3 meters was far too short, but remained convinced that his method of sacrificing processing speed was the correct approach. He paused for a moment, glancing at his identification card which clearly read Holless. He shrugged off his concerns, deciding he would simply deal with any problems as they arose. With his resolve hardened, he entered a vast, cluttered storeroom filled with countless parts and materials. Looking around with renewed purpose, he declared it was time to seek out the finest materials for his golem. Meanwhile, in a grand throne room, 2 kings held court. One, with a thick fur collar, sat on the main throne while another, the stout King Balsale of Tiamat, sat beside him. They were attended by a knight, a long-haired woman, and a kneeling, hooded figure. King Balsale remarked to the other monarch that he seemed to be in a good mood. The fur-collared king confirmed this, stroking his beard and explaining with satisfaction that they had just finished eliminating something rather troublesome. He is informed by an attendant that it is time for the emergency world conference to meet the hero. The king agrees, remarking that it would be poor form to be seen frowning. As he stands, a guard announces the activation of a transfer formation. The king strokes his beard, musing that he is not quite accustomed to such transfers. His companion, King Balsale, chuckles, noting that it would be a problem if he weren't used to it by now. Balsale continues, stating that while the power of transfer is currently managed by the World Conference, he intends to eventually make it the sole property of his own country. The dark-bearded king beside him grunts in agreement. The royal retinue proceeds through a massive hall, filled with dignitaries from across the lands seated at a vast, curved table. Heavy doors creak open at the far end, granting them passage. From a grand dais, an announcer calls for attention, proclaiming the arrival of the hero. A figure in ornate, high-heeled armor begins to walk forward with resounding steps. The hero is revealed to be a woman, her impossibly long, light-colored hair flowing behind her. She glances back, her presence commanding the attention of the entire assembly. The crowd of nobles is struck silent, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. Even the fur-collared king is taken aback, his eyes wide as he murmurs, "So, this is the hero." Far from the grandeur of the World Conference, life goes on as usual in the rustic, bustling streets of Calcite Village. Within the village, the recently dismissed Holless eats a meal. He reflects that since he was fired, he might as well do what he wants. He knows the research he needs to complete will require 10 years, and he is on a time limit. He finishes his drink with a grimace of frustration. His only option, he decides, is to try his luck at the Kinsekai Grand Veins Rare Stone Market. He sat at a small table, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of bread. A voice cut through his reverie, asking what he was so gloomily pondering. The voice belonged to a cheerful young man leading a white horse. He greeted Holless with a wave and a smile. The young man offered to lend an ear. After a moment's hesitation, Holless explained that he had just managed to escape from a corrupt organization. He elaborated, explaining that he was aware of the limited time he had to achieve his many goals, and that there were numerous factors he needed to connect and consider. The merchant apologized for speaking out of turn, remarking that while Holless seemed confident, he didn't think the Dragonstone Kingdom was so corrupt. He then correctly guessed that Holless was heading towards the treasure capital, Lapis. Holless, still chewing, confirmed he had business there. The merchant brightened, declaring that their destination was the same. He explained that, as a merchant, he was heading to Lapis because the Kinsekai Grand Veins there traded in all kinds of metals, even those one couldn't bring him personally. As he spoke, Holless knelt to inspect the wheel of the man's cart, noting that the axle was quite old. The merchant laughed heartily, impressed by Holless's keen observational skills. Holless replied seriously that he used to be involved with that sort of technology, a statement which caught the merchant by surprise. His expression shifted as he considered their situation. He noted that Lapis was quite a distance away and questioned if the merchant had a reliable way to travel. Then, he offered a solution. In exchange for a ride, he would repair the cart's axle. He agreed to the terms, stating that he would rely on the merchant until they reached their destination. The man, Jinji, smiled, confirming he would provide a ride to the treasure capital, Lapis, in exchange for the repairs. Holless then formally introduced himself. In response, the merchant extended a hand, introducing himself as Jinji and declaring their deal settled. Before they could finalize their arrangement, a sudden, violent tremor shook the ground, startling them both. The source of the commotion became clear as panicked townsfolk began to flee. Jinji grabbed Holless, asking what was happening, just as a large man shouted at them, demanding to know where they were going amidst the chaos. His eyes darted towards the disturbance, and he saw it. A skeletal dragon with purple scales, already engaged in battle with a young, spiky-haired warrior. The sight was unbelievable. Focusing on the creature, Holless noticed it was bound by heavy chains. He couldn't comprehend why a dragon would appear in a place like this. Suddenly, a flamboyantly dressed man named Yuri F. Kyoto leaped forward, announcing himself as a noble of the Diamante Kingdom and boasting that he would subjugate the beast. He laughed maniacally as he unleashed a powerful attack that struck not only the dragon but the surrounding area, showing no regard for the fleeing civilians. Holless watched, silently questioning the man's competence. The spiky-haired warrior who had been fighting the dragon watched the noble's reckless display with a grim expression. He muttered to himself about the others, warning that their carelessness would get them killed. As fires raged through the town, a group of civilians pleaded for help, crying that their families were trapped inside a burning building. The spiky-haired warrior froze, overwhelmed by the chaos and unsure what to do. From behind him, another warrior shouted, telling him he would die if he just stood there. The second warrior didn't wait, charging headfirst into the collapsing, fiery structure. The first hero called out for him to come back, demanding a response, but there was only silence. He was left alone, surrounded by the inferno, his hesitation palpable. He stood frozen over the fallen child, recognizing that she was not yet dead, but unable to move. Nearby, Holless watched the hero's paralysis with dawning horror as the building burned around them. His hand, clutching a healing potion, trembled violently. The faint, wheezing breaths of the injured child were the only sounds he could register over the roar of the flames. As the hero hesitated, Holless lunged forward, snatching the vial from his grasp. There was no time to waste. He had to wonder if he would even be in time. Without a second thought, he poured the restorative liquid over the unconscious girl's face, washing away some of the soot and grime. The spiky-haired hero could only watch, stunned into silence by the civilian's decisive action. As he stood, dumbfounded, the warrior Luster appeared behind him, emerging from the smoke. Suddenly, the structure groaned and shattered as a dragon crashed through the ceiling. The girl's brother cried out for his sister and his father. Holless shielded the girl, shouting back that the roof had collapsed and they couldn't stay put. The beast loomed over them, its shadow falling across the room. Holless stood his ground, ready to protect the child. In the background, Luster calmly carried another survivor from the blaze. A voice cut through the chaos. Jinji appeared in the doorway, holding the small, drenched, dog-like creature. Holless, are you all right? He called out. Holless, now holding the revived girl in his arms, turned toward the welcome sight of his friend. As Jinji holds the unconscious girl, her brother anxiously asks what's wrong with her. Holless calmly reassures the boy, explaining that she's all right, merely fainted. The children's mother rushes toward them, calling out her daughter's name, Nasha. Taking the girl into her arms, she listens as Holless suggests that breathing in some smoke should wake her. The mother tearfully expresses her profound gratitude. With the family safely reunited, Jinji turns his attention back to Holless. He quietly asks if Holless is avoiding the pursuit and questions what is happening with the ongoing farce, to which Holless gives a simple, non-committal acknowledgement. He continues, pointing out that while the mages manage to shoot down the dragon from a distance, the creature doesn't appear to be wounded from the fall. They both gaze at the beast, now grounded amidst plumes of smoke. Meanwhile, the flamboyant noble, Yuri F. Kyoto, confidently faces the dragon, boasting about his sword skills. Jinji turns to Holless and asks for his thoughts, but Holless simply states that he has a bad feeling about this. Yuri lunges, his twin blades flashing as he attacks the beast. The dragon lets out a furious roar. Nearby, the spiky-haired hero announces his intent to join the battle as well. The dragon's massive tail whips around and effortlessly swats Yuri aside, sending him flying. A mustachioed noble watches in stunned disbelief. From his vantage point, Holless remarks on the foolishness of the display. In response to the failed attack, the spiky-haired hero springs into action. He warns the dragon not to get carried away as he closes the distance, engaging the creature in close-quarters combat. Holless watches the new engagement intently. He murmurs to himself that while he holds no grudge against the dragon, he cannot allow it to regenerate. The beast lets out another defiant roar. With his decision made, he draws his sword and charges. Leaping high into the air, Holless raises his blade, preparing to bring it down upon the distracted dragon in a powerful strike. His attack landed with explosive force, felling the great dragon in a cloud of dust and debris. As the smoke cleared, he stood over the creature's hoard, a small, rectangular object in his hand amidst the scattered gold. Watching the swift conclusion from afar, another hero, clad in armor, conceded that the display was, at the very least, enough for a distraction. Sometime later, as their wagon rumbled away from the site of the battle, the merchant Jinji turned to his passenger. He questioned if it was truly all right to have left all that gold behind. He replied from within the covered wagon, explaining that carrying such a vast quantity of ingots and coins by himself would be far too troublesome for him at present. Jinji, now facing him directly, wondered aloud if the funds were meant to repair his home, which had been completely burned. Holless confirmed this was the case, noting that since it wasn't his family's main residence, he couldn't expect his parents to contribute. His expression hardened as he stared into the distance, reiterating that the complete loss of his home was a significant problem. Jinji could only agree. As their journey continued along a long, straight road, Jinji asked if they should perhaps take a detour, but Holless dismissed the concern, stating that it was fine. Meanwhile, in a grand, pillar-lined hall, a woman with exceptionally long, light-colored hair stood before a vast assembly. She was introduced as Luster, the leader of the hero community, there to deliver a report on the hero Ranhea. From his throne, a regal, bearded king addressed the assembly. He declared that for the achievement of saving the world, a reward would be given, and they could ask for whatever they desired. In response to the generous offer, Luster turned to face the king. She stated that she had just one thing to ask. She begins to speak, her voice steady before the king's. Her request, she explains, concerns the man who forged the path to the demon lord's subjugation, Master Holless, the one who trained all 6 executives of the Luster Report, including herself. Her demand is then stated plainly. She desires the privilege of a multinational, polygamous marriage. As this stunning declaration hangs in the air of the throne room, elsewhere, Holless sits quietly, his gaze lowered, completely unaware of the future being decided for him. In a vast, ornate hall filled with nobles and kings, a woman walks forward with determined steps, her presence commanding the attention of the entire assembly. She stops before the throne, where the fur-collared king questions her about a man named Holless. The woman states plainly that while Holless is a commoner, his master is the strongest golem master in the world. Her words cause a stir. She continues her report, revealing that just 1 week prior, Holless had been employed at the royal castle of the Diamante Kingdom. The noble from Diamante recoils in shock, realizing Holless was among those he had dismissed. He sputters in disbelief that a commoner was working in the castle, remembering how he had ordered them all to be thrown out. His king, now seething with rage, turns on him. He furiously demands to know why Zate dismissed the master of a hero, roaring that had he known, the noble himself would have been the one dismissed. The woman calmly interjects, explaining that she also worked at the Diamante Palace and learned of the situation through a letter. She admits her master's secretive nature was problematic, but due to the Demon King's influence, she took special measures to have him hired as a key official despite his commoner status. She continues, pointing out that many nations that embrace commoners gained the strength to resist the Demon King's invasion. The Diamante Kingdom, she implies, did not. The king and his nobles sweat, the weight of their failure pressing down on them. Addressing the entire assembly, She states that while her master's spousal privileges are not needed, citizenship rights are required to use a certain location. From the crowd, a young queen with small horn speaks up, identifying herself as Queen Lucia of the Chaos and Dragon Kingdom. She asks if the woman is acting as a proxy for an ailing monarch before declaring she has a request for Holless, Luster, and their entire party. Luster turns to face her. Queen Lucia makes a request. She wishes for them to be granted citizenship in the capital city of Lapis, so they may utilize the rare stone market where rare ores, a national treasure of her kingdom, are gathered. She slammed her hand down on the table, startling the king. She declared that she desired this, the citizenship for Holless's party, as her reward for the subjugation of the Demon King. The king's fist trembled with rage. He could not accept it. The Luster report from the hero community had already detailed how a single party, comprised of commoners, had achieved the subjugation with overwhelming strength. He seethed, finding it utterly unbelievable. He couldn't fathom handing over such a prize to another, smaller country. Queen Lucia watched him, backed by the silent figures of the world's other great heroes. Luster's expression hardened. She warned him not to get carried away. Her sharp tone caught the king, Hero Lungia, off guard. He demanded to know what she meant by her words. She gestured emphatically, questioning if he truly still failed to comprehend the meaning of her desire. The king held up a hand, telling her to wait. He accused her of demanding this simply to create an environment where the golem master, Holless, could acquire rare ores. He rose to his feet, arms spread wide, proclaiming that his Diamante kingdom was the greatest of all nations. He boasted that by leveraging their distribution network, many other countries could easily obtain the rare ores they sought. He then proposed an alternative. They could simply grant Holless special privileges to acquire the ores preferentially. He urged her to reconsider her request. Luster met his gaze without flinching. She countered that his kingdom was great in name only, asserting that it had simply become a gathering place for those displaced by the Demon King's influence. She then challenged him directly, asking if she was wrong. She continues her address, explaining that Holless's master possessed the power to command over 500 worker golems simultaneously, each performing 10 times the work of a human. King Lungia is aghast, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stammers that such a feat is impossible. She presses on, her gaze unwavering, questioning why he would dismiss such valuable officials when the Diamante Kingdom will soon need to address its finances. The king sputters, demanding to know what she means by finances. She elaborates that the special provisions enforced upon all nations during the war with the Demon King are steadily losing their power. One of these provisions, she specifies, concerned indemnities. The king looks utterly baffled. These provisions had been emergency measures during the invasion, establishing extensions on debt repayments, limits on interest, and even forcing some nations to provide financial aid to others. Returning her focus to the king, Luster asks if he truly believed he could simply wield his authority to ignore such matters. He can only grunt in frustration. She then addresses the wider assembly, remarking how strange it is that none of them have heard any complaints regarding their own kingdom's loans. The reason for this silence, she reveals, is that the hero community has been preparing loans nearly equal to the full amount owed and has been systematically purchasing the debt bonds from the original creditors. King Lungia's eyes widen in shock. Luster continues, informing him that the hero community also runs a loan business and that the nation with the single largest debt is his own, the Diamante Kingdom. The king is left speechless. From the crowd, a stout noble points a trembling finger, adding that the largest debtor of all is Duke Rigisoku, whose loans are so vast he would have to sell the royal palace to repay them. The accusation sent a shockwave of panic through the assembly. As the nobles erupt into chaos, Luster calmly states that while the interest rates are exceptionally low, she will be taking her time collecting the repayments. She continues her address to the stunned king, revealing that among all the indebted nations, only the Chaos and Dragon Kingdom is repaying its loans. She then presents her ornate weapon, identifying it as the Dragon's Silver Sword Telegarda, a blade forged in that very kingdom and used by her during the war against the Demon King. With the king sweating under the pressure, she lays out her terms. In exchange for their financial support, she and her master are to be granted citizenship and control of the Chaos and Dragon Kingdom's national treasury. She coolly asks if he understands that this has already been approved. Before the king can respond, Queen Lucia of the Chaos and Dragon Kingdom speaks, formally accepting the terms. She confirms that they recognize the citizenship of Luster and her companion. Luster thanks her and announces her departure, stating they have their own preparations to make. As she walks away, she glances back with a piercing, threatening gaze. She warns Queen Lucia that she understands what will happen if anything goes awry. The scene shifts to the capital city of Lapis in the Chaos and Dragon Kingdom, where citizens are lined up inside a large, official-looking building. Having left the tense negotiations behind, Luster lets out a long, weary sigh, her stern demeanor completely gone. Her attention is suddenly caught by a familiar voice calling out for someone named Lungia. She turns, her eyes widening in recognition as she sees her master. With a joyful shout of "Master," she leaps into his arms, hugging him tightly. Caught completely by surprise, he stumbles back. As she laughs, he remarks that her personality is completely different from her usual self. He gently pushes her back, explaining that because he is special, he needs to fill out some paperwork. He asks if she can wait for a moment while he gets it done. She cheerfully interrupts, declaring that there's no need. With a triumphant smile, she holds up a document, announcing that she has already acquired his portion of the citizenship and nationality papers. He looks on, surprised by her swift action, as she suggests they get going. She leads her master through the city streets, prompting him to ask where they are headed. Luster calmly informs him that it is their new mansion, a statement that leaves him momentarily stunned. An attendant waiting by the door simply confirms her words. He grabs her by the shoulders, flustered, questioning what she means by this. With a confident smile, Luster explains that by acquiring the Luster Report status, she also obtained a residence, and she fully expects him to live there with her. Moments later, they stand before a grand, two-story estate. Luster gestures proudly, announcing their arrival at their new home. The master stares, dumbfounded, a single thought echoing in his mind: a love nest. As they approach the entrance, a woman in a maid's uniform steps out to greet them. She welcomes back someone named Lungia and states that she has been waiting for the master. The maid, introducing herself as Tyeris, smiles warmly. She acknowledges that it has been a long time, both for herself and for the master. She turns and leads them inside, expressing her long-held anticipation for the day they could all live together under one roof. As the master takes in the spacious interior, Tyeris offers to give them a tour. As they walk through the halls, the master remarks on the quiet, noting the absence of anyone else. Tyeris confirms that for now, it is just her and Lungia. He observes that while the mansion has been cleaned, it still needs to be properly organized. Tyeris then gestures toward a specific room, explaining that she has already prepared a dedicated space for him to build his golems. Inside the workshop, the master looks around, impressed, admitting that it is more than he could have asked for. Tyeris replies that this is only natural, considering it a small repayment for all he did to raise her. He kneels down to inspect the supplies, pleased to see a wide variety of metals have been provided. Luster adds that with such an environment, he can conduct his research without any limitations. Tyeris watches them, quietly agreeing. He examines a lustrous crystal, a faint smile playing on his lips. With everything now in place, he reflects that he can finally begin his work in earnest. His attention then turns to some paperwork. He notes the surprising rarity of the metal that was used and considers that acquiring citizenship and national registration would have taken him at least 4 years on his own. As he reads, 2 young girls, one with her hair in buns and the other with long blonde hair, watch him with adoration. The girls suddenly embrace him warmly. He closes his eyes with a contented smile and thanks them. At that moment, Luster approaches, holding out another large crystal. She explains it's just a tip, but he looks at her, slightly bewildered by the casual generosity. Leaving the mansion, Luster, now wearing a cloak, stands resolutely before a large, official-looking building. Her expression is one of fierce determination. She is ready to demonstrate the true power of a hero's disciple. An official named Aderica, from the Chaostan Chamber of Commerce, expresses her frustration to Queen Lucia. She clutches her head in distress, complaining that the heroes have burdened her with a task. She laments that she is the one who has to conduct an investigation, insisting that it should be their responsibility, not hers. Queen Lucia, now flustered, asks what she is supposed to do. Aderica clarifies that it is an investigation and that she is the one assigned to it. The queen questions if Aderica is aware that their country is providing the hero community with a nationality. Aderica acknowledges this, but argues that it doesn't give them free rein, questioning the safety of having a single member handle such a broad investigation alone. The queen regains her composure, explaining that this is precisely a test for the hero. She states that having Holless, the one who raised the hero, conduct the investigation should be sufficient. Aderica is visibly taken aback by this response. Aderica counters that the hero's guardian is a golem master and, from a technical standpoint, he should also be investigated. She challenges the queen, asking if she is prepared to witness his true power. Nearby, Luster overhears and remarks that since the hero is so highly regarded, he must also be a person of excellent character. Meanwhile, the golem master, Holless, confirms to Aderica that the magic power source is in the castle basement. He asks if she is coming, and she agrees, though he questions if it's appropriate for her to take a request directly from the government. She simply says that's how it is. Just then, Luster enters, announcing she will go too and telling Aderica to come along. Holless leads the way into the castle basement, explaining it's more of a magic power pipe and not heavily trafficked. A maid, Tyeris, demonstrates a device, showing how an external power source heats a pot with the flip of a switch. Holless elaborates on the system's core. Magic stones or coins are inserted, converted to energy, and distributed throughout the residence, with waste being disposed of as money or items. Aderica turns to Luster, remarking that a golem master would naturally be an expert in magic tools. She suggests they use this opportunity to see his true abilities. Luster agrees, understanding the hidden meaning. The golem master looks back at them, confused by their whispering. Luster glares at him intensely, stating that while he can certainly explain the mechanics, her eyes will not be deceived. He asks what she means, but she dismisses it as him overthinking. He presses for an explanation. In a burst of frustration, Luster slams her fist on the stone railing, declaring she won't acknowledge him if he's going to be evasive. He calmly agrees to her terms. Below them, a vast chamber houses an enormous piece of machinery, the magic power supply station. Standing before the immense device, Luster asks if he can maintain it, and he confirms he can. Iderica remarks that this is far beyond what the Diamond Kingdom could manage. Holless explains that the magic supply is currently stopped, as it was previously housed in a mansion. Luster adds that the current hero's mansion has been significantly improved, allowing for a stable flow of magic power. Iderica is visibly surprised by this news. She appears flustered by the task of organizing the large-scale magic tools, while Luster, arms crossed, remarks that this should be a light task. Luster's skepticism grows as she watches Holless. She doubts he's anything more than a handyman, believing any praise he receives is only from his own master and subordinates. Unfazed, Holless turns from the power supply, announcing that he understands the problem and is ready to begin. He lays several metal rods on a nearby table, explaining that they are made of iron modified to better conduct magic, and that he intends to use them with some luminous powder. Iderica observes, noting that if the magic power is too weak, the method will fail. As he works, a sudden cloud of dust erupts from the table, startling both Luster and Iderica. Annoyed by the mess, Luster declares that she will fix it herself. With a wave of her hand, the dust vanishes, leaving the rod a clean, dark black. Luster looks pleased, and Iderica expresses her amazement. Holless observes the change, but Iderica explains that while the rod was originally gray, the ideal state is white. She sighs, adding that once it becomes this dark, restoring it is impossible. Luster turns on Holless, demanding to know why he is just standing there and ordering him to try his hand at it. Iderica joins in, pointing an accusatory finger and questioning why he is giving them instructions when she is the one who commissioned the work. He simply looks back, confused by their outbursts. Her aggressive stance falters as she suddenly flinches. Iderica, however, maintains a stern expression, telling Luster to stand down and let him proceed. Internally, Luster chastises herself, realizing she's gone too far and shouldn't have tried to show him up. Suddenly, Iderica erupts, shouting at him as he holds her arm. The decorative buns in her hair seem to come alive with anger, mirroring her expression and accusing him of being a pervert. He calmly tells her to look closely at her own hands instead. Luster watches the exchange, her expression shifting to one of confusion, while Iderica stares back at him, equally perplexed. Following his instruction, Luster glances down at her own hands, and her eyes widen in sudden, shocked realization. It becomes clear that Holless was not grabbing Iderica, but was instead steadying her hand to work on the very rod she held. With a confident smirk, he channels his energy, restoring the rod right in her grasp. He watches as Iderica yelps, startled by the sudden transformation of the rod in her hands. The part he touched has become overwhelmingly white, a stark contrast to its previous state. He can't help but laugh at her shocked expression. His amusement is cut short when Luster grabs him, demanding to know how he did it. Iderica, equally bewildered, admits she's never seen anything like it and asks him to teach her, at least for a little while. He explains that it's not about forcing it to become white, but simply imagining it that way. Following his advice, Iderica closes her eyes and concentrates, chanting for the rod to turn white. To Luster's surprise, she notices that the rod in Iderica's hands is indeed slowly getting whiter. She concedes that his restoration is far superior to her own. Holless acknowledges her desire to show off, but explains that true restoration seeks stability, not power. He believes a hero's true strength is the ability to return things to their proper state, a skill he spent 5 years honing. Luster is stunned by this revelation, realizing the depth of his dedication. Later that evening, Iderica excitedly recounts the day's events to her attendant. The scene shifts to a study where she is surrounded by books and scholars, a determined look on her face as she delves into her work. She reports to Queen Lucia and the assembled men that she had been trying too hard and hadn't grasped the technique, but now understands she has much to do. The queen, having heard that Iderica witnessed something incredible, listens intently. The queen asks what's on her mind. Iderica blushes, thinking of Holless and how she truly saw something amazing. With renewed determination, she declares that she will be the one to win. As she makes her vow, 2 mages in an underground chamber begin preparations for an unknown event. A carriage drawn by 2 powerful horses thunders down a road, kicking up clouds of dust as it moves with incredible speed. Watching the display, Queen Lucia's eyes sparkle with pure amazement. She clenches her small fists, exclaiming how incredible the sight is. Her companions observe as well. Luster notes the impressive speed of the blue flag carriage and asks the armored man beside her if Holless was the one who created the axle bearings it uses. The man confirms it, adding that it's also carrying 30% more weight than a standard carriage. He continues his explanation, stating that while there's a limit to the performance boost from axle bearings alone, they can reduce costs by using them to transport metal from a dungeon. The group stands together on a grassy hill, watching the carriage recede into the distance. Holless, having listened to their exchange, remarks that it was a good thing he did it. He explains that strengthening their transport capabilities is directly linked to national power, and without it, supporting the vast population that came for the Diamond Kingdom would have been impossible. Both Queen Lucia and the animal-eared girl stare at him, momentarily stunned. He then turns to Luster, stating that she must be well aware of the situation, as efficiently managing the logistics for a massive amount of supplies is a difficult task. When she questions his use of the word logistics, he clarifies that it was a term the hero used at the World Conference. Her mind flashes back to a memory of a bustling palace office, where a large number of golem clerks were employed to handle the immense administrative workload. Recalling that there were around 500 of them, she sputters in disbelief. Holless's voice continues, explaining that most of the populace were refugees, limiting the available workforce. To provide them with high-quality tools, research was necessary, and to transport the resulting food supplies, the development of better carriages was essential. He stares off into the distance, his expression unreadable. The animal-eared girl beside him asks if he really did all that, noting that he seems somewhat distracted. In the background, the carriage continues its journey. His focus returns to the present as he turns to Luster with a slight smile. He points out that while the blue flag carriage is fast, their own red flag one is falling behind. He muses aloud, wondering if some kind of trouble has occurred. He observed the horses, noting that the new axle bearings had eliminated most of the friction. With so little resistance from the carriage, the load should feel significantly lighter to them. Despite this, he mused that they were likely just getting accustomed to the new sensation. The horses themselves seemed perplexed by the sudden ease of their task, while Aderica peeked out from behind them. Seeing the open road ahead, he gave an instruction for them to run as much as they could. Aderica eagerly accepted, ready to take on the task. The situation brought to mind a recent conversation with Queen Lucia. She had been reviewing his documents, declaring them incomprehensible. She questioned how, if it only took an hour to create the axle bearings, his explanation could be so baffling, demanding to know what was going on inside his head. She listened as he simply replied that he was learning from a wide range of fields. He had then elaborated, explaining that the discipline of a golem master is an intermediate art, existing at the intersection of three distinct fields: earth magic, magic tool creation, and alchemy. His explanation prompted Aderica to ask how he typically studies. Queen Lucia, looking overwhelmed, remarked on the immense amount of knowledge required to master even a single one of those fields. Holless explained his process. He simply reads books that might seem unrelated, always considering how they might connect to something he'll need in the future. He continued, clarifying that the golem master technique itself was simply a combination of those three core elements. In his view, if one already understands the required components from the start, the process isn't particularly difficult. Lucia immediately countered his simplistic view. She argued that new techniques are born from combining various forms of knowledge, which must be gathered and integrated from daily life. It's not something that can be done without time, she insisted, calling his approach an unplanned whim. Her words struck Holless with force. He clutched his head, aghast at the realization. As he reeled, Aderica cheerfully added her own example, reminding him of how he'd told her to go buy ingredients only to return and find a refrigerator already full. Flustered, Holless insisted that wasn't the same thing at all. The memory faded, bringing him back to the present journey. Aderica, sensing his thoughts, told him not to worry. She said it was fine for him to be himself, even when dealing with the queen. He considered her words, a thoughtful expression on his face, and quietly asked if she was sure that was all right. He stood with his companions, arms crossed in thought, remarking on the peculiar nature of the country. There seemed to be a distinct lack of elitism, a cultural difference that had surprised him during his studies abroad. He then asked for a specific example to clarify his thoughts. In response, Luster began to explain, her words conjuring an image of a classroom. She pointed out that, unlike elsewhere, the schools here did not segregate students by social class. Nobles and commoners, regardless of their academic performance, shared the same classrooms, a practice she considered quite rare. She elaborated that this integrated system fostered a widespread understanding of the hardships faced by poorer families. This was a stark contrast to other nations, a thought that brought to Holless's mind the image of a gluttonous, oblivious noble. He had to agree that her point was valid. Luster continued her analysis of the social structure, noting that despite the shared education, a significant gap remained. She described how the children of nobility and wealthy merchants were accustomed to lavish meals as a matter of course. In contrast, she pointed to the reality for children from impoverished families. For them, a single inexpensive school meal might be all they had to eat for the entire day. The explanation resonated with him. I see, he murmured, recognizing it as a fundamental national trait. This understanding was reinforced by the sight of soldiers interacting casually and kindly with the local populace nearby. As he processed this, Luster turned her attention to him, a document in her hands. After asking if something was amiss, she changed the subject, observing that the techniques he employed felt somewhat dated. He conceded that her observation was likely accurate. He was, after all, a golem master accustomed to the life of an adventurer, implying his methods were practical rather than cutting-edge. With a determined clench of his fist, he presented her with a thick, ornate book. He explained that it was a biography, written a century ago by a significant figure from the past. The unexpected gift left both Luster and Aderica momentarily stunned. Aderica took the tome, identifying it as the Book of Adventure. She explained its contents, a chronicle of the author's travels and a detailed record of their many inventions as a golem master, a legacy as vast and imposing as the distant mountains. She looks at the book with bright eyes, asking if it belongs to someone Holless admires. He holds the tome aloft, confirming her guess with a simple nod. He opens it, only to find the pages have been thoroughly torn apart. He fumes internally, wondering who would do such a thing, and realizing that if it's truly broken, he's in trouble. As Aderica playfully prods Queen Lucia's cheeks, asking about a cipher, Holless reveals that the book is indeed encoded. A faint light pulses from its pages. He contemplates the result of deciphering it. The knowledge within reveals a dark truth. 2,000 years ago, the world was usurped by 5 shadowy individuals. His companions, confused by the term usurped, question its meaning. He explains gravely that to defeat these 5 figures, the power of a golem master is essential. Overhearing this, Luster has a sudden realization. She asks if this means Holless himself has acquired incredible techniques as a golem master. Her expression a mix of shock and dawning comprehension. He simply smiles, a knowing glint in his eye, and raises a finger to his lips, suggesting that she should be able to figure it out from what he's already said. The implication stuns Luster. She points out that the usurpation happened 2,000 years ago, exclaiming that he must have lived an incredibly long time. The idea seems utterly bizarre to her. Ignoring her shock, he turns to leave, stating that it's time for him to go. His companions question this abrupt change, but he simply remarks that this is how things must proceed. He then addresses Aderica directly, advising her that to become a truly great person, she should find something to aspire to. He explains that the world is full of people who have challenged the status quo throughout history, and he decided he wanted to witness that for himself. He continued his counsel, explaining that magical power can become anything. Ultimately, he told her it all depends on the wielder. Her face lit up with newfound determination. With a clenched fist, she declared that she understood. The animal-eared girl then suggested they investigate something if they had time, and offered her help with their carriage if any trouble arose. Aderica readily agreed, while Holless simply watched with a knowing smile. Elsewhere, nestled within the royal capital of Lapis in the Chaostin Dragonstone Kingdom, lay the entrance to the Kinsekai Great Vein. This massive dungeon was renowned as a place where adventurers could secure high-quality metals as drop items from the monsters within its halls. Inside its stone corridors, the spiky-haired hero stopped short, his attention caught by a hooded figure resting on a chest, their remarkably long, light hair spilling out from under the cloak. In another part of the capital, Earl Godal of the Diamante Kingdom expressed his boredom. He scoffed at the adventurers, remarking with disdain that they were all likely gossiping about his holy sword. He held up the weapon, the holy sword guard might, as his companions clamored to see it. Their eagerness fed his ego, and he laughed boastfully, asking if they truly wished to behold its power. His expression soured as his attention drifted. He muttered to himself that a holy sword was not something to be casually viewed, his gaze fixed on a conversation happening nearby. The source of the commotion became clear. The spiky-haired hero was confirming a rumor that Hero Lungia had entered the dungeon. The news struck Godal, who internally seethed at what he considered a potential historic disgrace. An adventurer explains to a stunned Holless that this isn't about earning money, but about training with their master. Holless reels back in shock, questioning if the hero truly has a master. His casual conversation is violently interrupted as Earl Godal seizes him by the collar. The Earl roars, demanding to know who a mere commoner is to speak to him, a member of the Amode family, with such an adventurer-like attitude. He throttles Holless, ordering him to unhand him. He loosens his grip slightly, demanding to know where the hero has gone. A sinister smile spreads across his face as he decides he will show them something interesting, dragging Holless along as he strides forward. They arrive at a training ground where a crowd has gathered. From a balcony above, 2 onlookers observe the scene. One notes that the man below has picked up a wooden sword, while the other confirms that the event has not yet begun. Down in the arena, the spiky-haired man faces Lungia. She apologizes for the large crowd that has assembled, but he dismisses her concern, stating that it doesn't matter since he was the one who made the declaration in the first place. As they prepare, the crowd murmurs amongst themselves, noting that the Demon King's power is completely dominated by man, so getting a good look at this exchange is a sure thing. Lungia studies her opponent, thinking his expression is unexpected. She had secretly believed him to be some kind of supremacist. Their eyes meet across the training ground. With a look of intense focus, Lungia announces her intent to begin. Here I come. He stands his ground, wooden sword held at the ready. In a blur of motion, Lungia closes the distance, her own blade a silver streak arcing towards him as the crowd watches in silence. Just as her strike is about to connect, Earl Godal shoves his way to the front of the crowd. He scoffs loudly, declaring that this man is the hero's master. He finds it laughable, mocking the man's amateurish stance. The sudden outburst startles Lungia, causing her to halt her attack in surprise. He continues his taunts, expressing disbelief that she was taught by such a weak-looking man and finding her title of hero suspicious. Lungia cuts him off, telling her opponent that there is no need to feel like a master, and urges him to continue their match. As the tense standoff continued, Earl Godal gestured dismissively towards the spiky-haired man. He loudly proclaimed to the crowd that they were here to see the hero's training and demanded the man step aside. His voice dripped with contempt as he clenched his fist, declaring that the idea of a commoner defeating the Demon King was a foolish story. He refused to entertain the notion any further, stating that there was nothing more to discuss. In response to the outburst, the spiky-haired man and Lungia simply watched him, their expressions hardening as the crowd began to murmur amongst themselves. With a flourish, Godal drew his blade, a faint aura shimmering around it. He announced himself as Godal Y, Immediate of the Diamante Kingdom, bearer of a holy sword from the Senachka Church, and vowed to personally strip away the man's pretense. Before he could advance, Lungia blurred into motion, positioning herself between her master and the earl. She insisted that her master didn't understand, recognizing Godal's display as pure skill. Nearby, two nobles whispered in disbelief, one noting that he thought the Demon King's subjugation was a solo act, only for his companion to sharply tell him to be quiet. Godal ignored her, lunging forward with his sword raised. He shouted that it was impossible for a mere commoner to defeat the Demon King, accusing the man of some trickery. He roared for the man to feel the power of the holy sword, Guardmight, upon his own body. The spiky-haired man remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the charging earl. With a single, dismissive word, annoying, an invisible force erupted from him, blasting Godal backward through the air as the crowd cried out in shock. He landed hard on the stone floor, gasping for breath as his attendants rushed to his side, calling his name in panic. The spiky-haired man calmly watched, beginning to explain that magical power constantly seeks stability. He continued, elaborating that this power moves by drawing in all the surrounding air, creating immense pressure. All he had done, he stated, was direct that pressure at the earl. As Godal was helped to his feet, the spiky-haired man turned away from the scene. He informed the defeated noble that for someone of his caliber, neither a sword nor magic was necessary. Simply taking his breath away was more than enough. He concluded with finality that Godal was certainly not the hero's master. He explained to Luster that as one's power grows, their aura should take on a specific color, yet his own remained transparent. He mused that a formally trained holy sword wielder would be felled by just a light touch from such a force. In response, Luster praised him, calling him master, and declaring his display brilliant. She recalled someone named Tyeris once describing her own gaze as being like a great cannon, and affirmed that he was, without a doubt, the one she served. He caught the weapon tossed to him as Luster's own power began to flare. This time, for sure, she declared, readying herself for a confrontation. A powerful aura erupted from her, forcing him to brace himself. He questioned her actions, warning that if she got any closer, her efforts to grow stronger would be pointless. Undeterred, she announced her advance. He considered her approach reckless, a lesson he would have to teach her himself. Clenching his fist, he resolved to act, stating that with the power of the Demon King who once ruled over men now in his possession, he would do what was required. With an unseen force, he sent her flying backward across the courtyard. She cried out as she hit the ground, the watching crowd gasping in shock. He calmly informed her that there was still time. From the ground, she looked up at him as he asked if she had become too strong. Luster looked away, apologizing and admitting she wasn't even 100 times stronger than she used to be. Her master looked on, surprised by her response. She rose to her feet, a confident smile on her face as she agreed with his assessment. He returned the smile. Internally, Luster reflected that her master's strength remained constant, always far beyond her own reach. Her expression hardened with resolve. She vowed to herself that one day, she would surpass him and stand by his side, reaching a place beyond his current power. Inside a room at an inn, a nobleman in a fur-collared robe stands over a young man, berating him. He demands to know what his foolish son is thinking. He reminds the young man of his previous warnings, that rumors of him subjugating the demon lord would cause trouble. The nobleman then reveals a shocking truth. His house, the Immediate report, owes Luster a debt of 20,000 gold coins. The young man looks up, stunned by the revelation. His shock turns to outrage. The young man leaps to his feet, shouting that 20,000 gold coins is 100 times the Hakusen family's annual budget. The nobleman calmly explains the condition. If the demon lord is subjugated, the debt does not need to be repaid. Furthermore, he adds, they have already received over 10,000 gold coins in aid for this very debt. He clenches his fist as the scheme becomes clear. If they simply don't acknowledge the demon lord's defeat, they can secure a special loan from the world. A dark, calculating smile spreads across his face. But the nobleman cuts through his thoughts, leaning in sternly. He declares that acknowledging the demon lord's subjugation is a matter of global security, questioning how the young man could possibly say otherwise to the world. In response, the young man turns away to the window. The nobleman continues his tirade, blaming the young man's selfish actions for preventing a reduction in the interest rate. He demands to know if he understands, and then orders him to bring out the Hakusen family's treasured sword. He calls him a fool, pointing out that the Hakusen family's annual budget is a mere 200 gold coins. Even with an interest rate of only 1%, the payments to the Shinataka Church for the Holy Sword are enormous. The young man stares at his own blade, lost in thought, wondering how things came to this. The nobleman continues his explanation, revealing that the Shinataka Church and Luster Report also carry massive debts and are seizing assets from various countries to cover them. Overwhelmed, the young man covers his face in despair. He presses on, stating that the world is no longer sustained by the funds from Luster Report. He delivers a final, crushing blow, accusing the young man of staining the reputation of the hero community that he supposedly leads. The weight of it all causes the young man to cry out in anguish. His anguish turns to action. He suddenly grabs his sword and bolts for the door. The nobleman, caught off guard, calls out, demanding to know where he is going. He walked with purpose down a wooded path, leaving the city behind, his expression a mask of grim resolve. As he considered venturing deeper into a dungeon, a sharp command to halt cut through the air. A sword blade suddenly appeared inches from his face, its wielder demanding he order his disciple to repay the money loaned to the Immediate family. The man who had ambushed him, Earl Godal, stepped into view. He admitted that since he couldn't win in a direct confrontation, he had deliberately waited for this moment. A confession that only seemed to irritate the hero. He paid the threat no mind, continuing on his way toward a nearby building. Godal watched, stunned, questioning why he was being ignored, then realized with a jolt that the aura of the hero's holy sword was blatantly visible. This realization hardened Godal's expression. Gripping his own weapon, he declared that if that was the case, this would be over quickly. He lunged, blade extended. The hero turned to face him, utterly unfazed. Godal shouted that this was not a threat, but an order from him, Godal Immediate, the eldest son of the world's most powerful nation. The hero glanced at the tattered remains of a document on the ground. He stated coolly that if he had given the word, his companion would have burned the contract on the spot, then told Godal to hurry up. The money they had borrowed was not for personal gain. It was earned during their arduous journey to defeat the Demon Lord, acquired by felling mighty beasts without aid. To demand its return was to deny the very steps they had taken. Godal scoffed, declaring that such sentiment was irrelevant. He angrily questioned why he, a nobleman, should be expected to heed the command of a commoner. The hero calmly mentioned the hero and adventurer communities, implying a code of conduct. Godal sneered back, retorting that if adventurers die during their journey, there's no need to repay their debts. With a malicious grin, he concluded that he wasn't the one at fault. The blame lay with those who had survived. He turns his back on the nobleman, ordering him to stop. Earl Godal recoils in disbelief, shouting that he is the one who gives commands. The Earl hesitates, a bead of sweat on his brow as a thought occurs to him. He recalls being told that the dungeon's magic seeks stability. He elaborates on the principle. The human body stores magic in a way different from the physical dimension. A holy sword is empowered by channeling immense magic through it, meaning that with just a bit of pressure, he should be able to force the hero to listen. The hero, however, remains unimpressed. He states that all the Earl is doing is creating pressure by brandishing his holy sword, and warns him that he is no match for a golem master. As the hero speaks, the Earl's hands clench into trembling fists, his patience worn thin. He asks if the Earl learned nothing from their previous encounter, questioning why a painful lesson didn't stick. He concludes that for someone who refuses to listen, the only recourse is an iron fist. The Earl's face contorts in terror as he begs him to stop. He unleashes a swift punch, recalling a time when he was the one who was utterly defenseless and beaten. The force of the blow sends Earl Godal hurtling backward through the air. His expression is grim and focused as he follows through with the strike. Without a moment's hesitation, he turns and sprints away into the nearby woods, leaving the Earl to crash violently to the ground in the distance. His escape is cut short as he suddenly stops. Elsewhere, the long-haired woman, Luster, senses the presence of a holy sword from outside and alerts her master. She and her maid watches the man, Holless, lies face down in the dirt. The maid cheerfully remarks on the golem punch iron sanction, suggesting they could just leave him be, but Luster remains silent. He pushes himself up, examining his gloved fist. He reflects that his body has been toughened to the point where even a golem strike is manageable, but he knows he must find a way to prevent such confrontations from happening again. Still on his knees, he looks up at Luster and explains the situation. He has been receiving endless complaints from Earl Godal, and with hundreds of claims flooding the capital each day, he fears that ignoring even one could incite a riot. Luster listens, her arms crossed. She reminds him that in the Diamante Kingdom, a commoner's duty is to contribute, not to complain. She explains that due to the Demon King's special influence, her own position as a commoner solving problems is precarious, and his sudden flood of issues is making things difficult. His thoughts drift to the past, recalling crowds shouting about their tax money. He remembers having to deal with those who would run wild whenever a societal problem arose, trying to comprehend the extreme logic that drove them to incite such chaos. Returning to the present, Holless slumps in defeat. The maid, Tyaris, looks at him with a gentle smile, remarking that he must have had a very difficult time. Luster watches him, her expression unreadable. Their conversation is interrupted as a local woman and her two small children approach the group, offering a warm greeting. The woman presents a large basket overflowing with fruit and baked goods, asking them to please accept it. Tyaris takes the gift with a wide, appreciative smile, thanking her profusely. Tyaris turns to Luster, noting that they've received yet another gift. She then explains to Holless, who has since stood up, that this is a token of gratitude for the maintenance he performed on the old magic power department. He quietly confirms that this is correct. A diagram reveals the impact of his work. The city's magic power efficiency has drastically improved, with the system now running cleanly. As a result, the amount of magic needed to power the city has been reduced from 30% to just 20%. Luster lets out a soft sound of impressed realization. A grateful citizen, holding an official notice, explains to an unseen person that taxes have been significantly lowered. He presents this as a token of their appreciation, clarifying that they worked together to figure out how the tax reduction came to be. In the background, other townspeople bow deeply in respect. Meanwhile, Tyeris, holding a basket of fresh produce, asks Luster if she is considering hoarding. Luster, looking thoughtful, clarifies that she was actually contemplating the high transparency of the national budget for Dragonstones. Tyeris smiles, remarking that the information is quite easy to find if one simply investigates. Her attention is suddenly caught by a child in the distance calling out for their mother. A flicker of recognition crosses Luster's face as she identifies the child as a troublemaker. Elsewhere, as Holless walks with Luster, he seems surprised by her question about whether he is happy. He admits that while he's taken aback by the differences in national character, his cooperation with this country is ultimately for his own purposes, and he lets out a weary sigh. He continues on alone, approaching a doorway. He reflects internally that after his long period of work in the royal capital, he never expected to be praised or thanked for his efforts. Back with Luster and Tyeris, Luster wonders aloud if she unconsciously expects to be thanked for her own work. Tyeris posits that because the master's competence is so conspicuous, he will surely be targeted by the Demon King. She concludes that it is a difficult matter for them to speak of. Within the executive office of the Grand Tymant Kingdom Castle, the king gazes out a window. He muses that what Holless is doing is excessive, questioning if the man intends to take over the core of the world's largest nation all by himself. His thoughts are shattered as a guard bursts into the room, shouting for his majesty. The guard reports that a provision carriage has broken down, with no spare parts available for exchange. The king reacts with irritation, muttering that the guard should have not. Before he can fully process this, another official rushes in, reporting that the stationary magic tools in the capital are malfunctioning. The king clenches his fist in frustration, realizing he can't even get a proper report compiled. He seethes at the state of his own country. The convenient life in the capital is supported by these stationary magic tools. However, now that the magic power supply stations are no longer being properly maintained by Holless, the situation has become dire. On a quiet street, a lamppost flickers and dies, plunging the corner into darkness. At his desk, the king explains the core of the problem to his guards. Most of the alchemists responsible for maintenance are of noble birth, relying on their connections rather than their technical skills. As a result, their abilities have stagnated. The consequences are clear in the workshops. The magic tools, believed to be from another dimension left by a golem master, are failing. With no spare parts or repair manuals remaining, there are precious few who can properly manage the work. In Holless's now empty office, a guard reflects on the situation. Holless's general open space had been a clever way to solve the commoners' problems, but now those issues stand unresolved, threatening to boil over into riots. While the performance of most magic tools depends on the user, golems are an entirely different matter. The king, seated on his throne, reiterates that a tool's effectiveness varies by user. When a guard reports that they are short-staffed, the king erupts, declaring that the commoners should solve their own problems and ordering the guard to work 10 times harder, like a golem. The startled guard immediately apologizes for his impertinence. His outburst fading, the king sits alone at his desk, signing documents with a heavy sigh. He knows that, above all else, the food supply must not be interrupted. If it is, the nation risks losing its title as the world's largest nation. His quiet concerns are shattered when an attendant rushes in, announcing a disaster. He reports that the hero Godal, eldest son of the emoted earldom, made contact with his master. The king is stunned. The attendant continues, explaining that the hero was defeated on the spot and is now being held captive, effectively turning his master into an enemy. He clarifies that the hero's side has made no demands yet. However, the emoted family is in debt for 20,000 gold coins. The king's hand tightens into a fist as he calculates that paying just 1% of that debt, 200 coins, would consume the family's entire annual budget. Gazing out the window, the king reflects on his past decisions. The emoted lands had no significant industry, yet he granted the family their title. He muses that if their budget had been used for infrastructure and public investment, things might have turned out differently. His reflection ends. Turning back to the attendant, he gives a firm command. Prepare 20,000 gold coins. He will pay the debt from the national treasury. The attendant can only stare in disbelief. He then clarifies the full extent of his order. The emoted family's assets are to be seized, leaving them with only the bare minimum. Afterward, they will be exiled to the frontier. The attendant, processing the severity of the command, asks if the king is truly serious. He asks the king about a debt. The monarch confirms that Gardal has a large one, explaining that it dates back 12 years to the time of the Labyrinth Flood in the Tymant Kingdom, a crisis that forced his hand. The king, his face shadowed with anger, adds that if Gardal hadn't failed so spectacularly, he himself would no longer be the crown prince. He dismisses his attendant, declaring that this payment will finally settle the matter. As the attendant departs, the king is left with the receipt, a loan certificate for 20,000 gold coins delivered to the hero community. The sight of the actual document makes his stomach ache as he gazes out at the castle towers. The brief moment of quiet is shattered as the same attendant bursts back into the room, breathless and panicked. He calls out to his liege, who turns with a weary expression, asking what the matter is this time. The attendant's report sends a shock wave through the king, who stares at a closed door in disbelief. He roars, demanding to know what this is and what they are doing. His fury mounts as he clutches the report, his knuckles white. The attendant explains that the son of Earl Emoted has caused a violent disturbance at the hero community facilities. The king, trembling with rage, questions if they intend to bring ruin to the entire kingdom as he begins to question all involved. The report continues, detailing how the Emoted heir drew his holy sword within the hero's temple. The situation was only resolved by paying off the earl's debt and exiling both the earl and his son to the frontier. The king listens, his shock turning to grim understanding. The attendant's report clarifies the Emoted family scheme. The proud earl and his son had used a hero as a joint guarantor for their loan, specifically to provoke an incident. The son is shown belittling a commoner, while the earl muses that commoners are easier to control than heroes, whom he considers inferior. The full scope of their audacity becomes clear. The Emoted family had orchestrated the entire affair, believing the king would be forced to pay their debt and pardon their crimes. The earl is pictured laughing triumphantly at the thought. The king's hand clenches into a fist, his knuckles cracking under the strain. His rage finally explodes. The king slams his fist down, roaring, "Are they making a fool of me?" He commands his attendant to investigate immediately why such a thing has occurred. The attendant, unflinching, reports that the investigation is already underway. He reports to the furious king, explaining that the document for the 20,000 gold coins was prepared after a study group led by the duke. The king's fist tightens as he realizes the depth of the plot, muttering that this was the source of the problem. The king elaborates that while the surface details seemed plausible, the Emoted earl's case was a special matter, a personal loan he had with Godal. He asks his attendant for the total amount of the debt. The attendant, sweating, delivers the shocking news: 1 billion gold coins. His teeth grinding, the king begins to write, seething at the audacity of the scheme. He wonders if they truly believed he could repay a sum 10 times the kingdom's entire annual budget of 100 million gold. The pressure becomes too much, and he snaps his quill in a burst of fury. The attendant flinches as the king roars in frustration, realizing there is no other way to resolve the situation but for him to pay the money. Elsewhere, the headmaid Tyeris calmly pours tea. She muses that she expected this outcome the moment the Tiamat kingdom repaid the initial 20,000 gold. She connects this event to a simultaneous, multi-pronged attack on the hero community and its facilities, questioning if it's a blood feud. She takes a sip, speaking to Luster. Tyeris remarks that while their opponents are clever, their imaginations are lacking. She doesn't consider them truly intelligent, but rather driven by a narrow-minded malice. The document in Luster's hands is a report detailing the Tiamat kingdom's hostility toward the hero community. It questions the general agreement and the total debt, confirming that community members are being interrogated. In another location, the king speaks with Tyeris, looking utterly exhausted but relieved. He confirms that the great problem of the 1 billion gold debt has been settled, admitting he never thought he'd be able to pay such a sum. Behind Tyeris, vast piles of gold coins are stacked high. Returning to their conversation, Luster asks Tyeris how they should settle the score. Tyeris smiles and proposes a strategy: find out what their enemies want and perhaps give it to them. Luster listens, contemplating the unusual suggestion. She considered Tyeris's proposal, her expression initially troubled. Closing her eyes, she mulled over the implications of such an unconventional strategy. Her contemplation suddenly gave way to a brilliant, confident smile. She presented a new idea. What if they were to purchase an antenna? She noted that while they needed metal for the master's golem, this was a different matter entirely. She specified that this particular antenna was located in the capital of the Diamond Kingdom. As it stood, the master's golem had an operational range of a mere 3-meter radius. Tyeris, surprised, asked if such a device truly existed in the capital, to which Luster simply confirmed that it did. Tyeris processed this information, glancing towards the master as he worked. She remarked that while building an antenna in the capital seemed simple in concept, it would be quite difficult in practice, both in terms of acquiring the necessary materials and possessing the required technology. At this, both women burst into shared laughter. Luster cheerfully dismissed the complications, declaring they should just buy it instead. Tyeris readily agreed, their path forward now clear and met with enthusiasm. The king of Tiamat rests his head, a heavy weariness upon him. He holds a document in his hand, recognizing that a great turning point is at hand. His moment of contemplation is interrupted as an attendant addresses him from across the grand desk. "Your Majesty," the attendant, Holless, speaks plainly, his expression serious. He states that, to be frank, he does not wish to accept the king's demand. He is immediately questioned by the king, who asks why he feels this way, reminding him that he must have seen the benefits. Holless acknowledges this, explaining that handing over the antenna to the hero's community would bring great advantages, such as significant loans and other promises. The king presses further, demanding to know why Holless refuses to cooperate. He lays bare the kingdom's dire situation. Even if they were to use the entire national budget for a year, they could only pay 1% of the interest owed. The Tiamat kingdom is at its absolute limit. Holless's mind drifts to Luster's conjecture regarding the hero's master. She believed him to be specialized in ranged manipulation abilities, a thought visualized by the image of the spiky-haired hero standing before several blank, controlled figures. Returning to the present, he continues his argument, stating that even if the hero's master were to return after they handed over the antenna, things would not be as they were before. The king, stroking his beard thoughtfully, simply commands him to continue. The king then asks if Holless has also read the 3 great discoveries of the ancient world, which he confirms. The titles of the ancient tomes are visible. The Principles of Super Ancient Magic, the Great Encyclopedia of Magic, and the copy of the Super Ancient Magic. He lays out his own theory. It is only natural to assume the antenna was used to supplement a range that the hero's master was lacking. Therefore, the king concludes the only reason the hero's master was active in their country was because the antenna was located there. With a tap of his finger on the desk, the king states his final word on the matter. That is the only reason. Inside the castle, the official Holless clutched his chest, lost in thought. He had hoped to somehow invite the hero back to this castle. After all, the man had served for a long time, a fact well documented in the kingdom's records, just as Holless himself had. He stood before the king, who was reviewing a letter. The monarch looked up from the document and asked what the hero had said, then mused aloud why the nobles would have read such a letter. Holless calmly reported that, at present, the antenna was not being used in their country, so its absence would not be an issue. In response, the king slumped over his desk in apparent frustration. He grumbled that giving away useless junk would make the nation look cheap, and that the common people were easy to handle, fools without imagination. Holless, however, held a different view. He believed one should not trust what they haven't seen with their own eyes. It was for this very reason that gathering information and having subordinates who could provide accurate reports was paramount. Suddenly, the king shot up from his seat, his fist clenched. He declared that he now fully understood the idealistic words his father used to speak. His sharp gaze fixed on Holless. "Your Majesty," the official asked. The king's command was clear. Accept the hero's request and prepare to hand over the antenna. He continued, his voice resonating with authority, explaining that he was choosing to discard the possibility of the hero's master returning. He added a stark warning. However, he could not guarantee the safety of the nobles. Holless quietly affirmed his understanding. With a decisive gesture, the king issued his final, shocking order. List all the troublesome dungeons within the country's borders and throw the nobles into them. Bowing his head, Holless accepted the command. As the king laughed heartily with his court, Holless looked down, contemplating the sudden shift. Just a few days prior, His Majesty had been gathering every fool he could find, the very same ones he now planned to eliminate. The official turned to leave, but the king's voice stopped him. "Can you do it?" he asked. Holless looked back, a flicker of uncertainty on his face. He wondered if Holless was angry that he hadn't properly evaluated the hero's actions. Holless clarified his position, stating that he had no interest in the earl's family, who had been pushed to the brink of ruin, even with the holy sword. He saw no reason to concern himself with such a vessel. The king seemed to accept this, murmuring in agreement. He then asked if there were any other matters to discuss. The king, his back still turned, hesitated for a moment before responding. The scene shifted to a memory or an example, a commoner at a counter, making a claim. To some, such displays were merely a fleeting amusement, nothing more. Back in the present, the king clutched his head in frustration. He considered the options: apologize, keep his distance as promised, and at least prevent the relationship from deteriorating further. Ultimately, he felt he had no choice but to concede. Watching the monarch's display, Holless reflected that a man like him was never meant to be contained within this kingdom. The initial impression had been impressive, but now it felt like watching a maiden in the throes of crush. Suddenly, the king's demeanor shifted. His eyes widened as he remembered something. He mentioned that besides the antenna, there was a bonus in the underground storage and asked if it could be included. When Holless inquired what this bonus was, the king quickly dismissed the question. As Holless departed, closing the door behind him, he heard the king lamenting that, as the head of the house, he regretted being unable to reward his subordinates' actions. Once alone, the king's true nature surfaced. His expression hardened as he mused that things were simply returning to their rightful place. He could not be contradicted, and everything would eventually be reclaimed for the nation's development. His thoughts then turned to the bonus, wondering how it would influence events. Deep within a cavern of jagged crystals, a young man named Holless navigates the treacherous terrain. He pauses, his gaze fixed on something in the distance, before swiftly repositioning himself along the cavern floor. Suddenly, a winged creature composed of sharp crystals dives from the ceiling. Holless reacts instantly, a wisp of fiery energy escaping his lips as he braces for the attack. The creature swoops past. He observes its flight, realizing the metallic bird flies using only magic. He muses that encountering it in this uncharted area is fortunate, but a flicker of doubt crosses his mind. His doubt is immediately confirmed as the creature's body unfolds and transforms into a larger, more menacing crystallin dragon. It lets out a piercing screech, but Holless remains calm, thinking his efforts have not been in vain. In response, he raises a gloved hand and clenches his fist, shattering a small, glowing crystal he held within. From the burst of light, a large, futuristic cannon materializes in his grasp. He recognizes the weapon as a cannon-type golem, and decides this is the perfect opportunity to test. Taking aim, he fires a powerful blast of energy directly at the approaching crystalline beast. The energy beam strikes the creature head-on, the impact echoing through the cavern. Holless feels a wave of intense heat wash over him from blast. As the light from the explosion fades, a small, glowing cube, the creature's core, falls neatly into his outstretched hand. He examines it with a smirk, noting that it was more fragile than he expected. With his hunt concluded, the young man hefts a large, full sack, preparing to head home. He then empties its contents, larger crystalline chunks, and begins to smash them with a hammer, breaking them down into a pile of valuable cores. He was in the warehouse when Luster found him, kneeling amidst several crates. She asked if he was already back, and he confirmed, explaining that he was sorting through his haul, separating the items he needed from those he didn't. She watched him for a moment before turning to the head maid, Tyeris, who was bringing a tray. Tyeris noted that he had just returned from the dungeon and should be resting. Luster, still observing him, asked what exactly he was doing. The head maid approached him directly, questioning his actions. She told him she understood he was sorting necessary items from unnecessary ones, but pointed out that the crystal he was inspecting looked identical to the ones he had just discarded. He explained that, simply put, someone with a superior appraisal skill can see that while two crystals might look the same, their quality is different. He held up two examples, one clearly rated higher than the other, which surprised Tyeris. She then asked if this meant he was mixing unnecessary metals into the ore she had prepared. He confirmed this, stating that with his level of alchemy, he could supplement the materials with rare ores from deep within the dungeon to adjust the final product. He recalled the path deep into the dungeon, reflecting on the low drop rate of the required items. The journey itself was tedious and troublesome. Meanwhile, Luster asked Tyeris if the ores her master acquired were for a level of alchemy he couldn't yet achieve. Tyeris confirmed this, explaining that Golem Master is an intermediate skill between Terramancy and alchemy, used for creating magic tools. He, however, clarified that he wasn't specialized in alchemy itself. Pausing for a moment with a cup of coffee that had been brought for him, he continued, telling Luster that since he had done his part, he was leaving the rest of the process to Tyeris and the others. Luster acknowledged his decision, understanding. She then asked if he required the medal's bonus. Taking a sip from his cup, he looked back at her, puzzled, and asked what she meant by a bonus. His attention turns to a new acquisition, an antenna from the Tyrant Kingdom. Tyeris confirms its arrival, explaining that she negotiated a significant reduction in their loan as payment for it. She then presents a wrapped box, noting it was delivered ahead of schedule as a bonus. He explains to Luster that with their current items, they cannot expand their operational capabilities to a master level. He believes that by increasing the range of what they can handle, they can create higher quality golems. Leaning back with his arms crossed, Holless remarks with satisfaction that the antenna will certainly be convenient, a sentiment shared by smiling Luster and Tyeris. Luster then questions why the antenna wasn't used in the capital. Holless clarifies that its purpose is to align the path of magical power with the antenna's own standards. Tyeris elaborates, explaining that the kingdom's magic couldn't be aligned with the antenna's standards, which meant that any magic not matching its specifications could not be created. From his bedside, Holless wonders why the kingdom would store such an item. Tyeris reveals the truth. The antenna is not something made by the kingdom, but a super ancient magical tool created by someone named Ziha or Ash. Luster adds that while the bonus item is quite tacky, it was kept stored deep underground in the castle. Holless is stunned, questioning the existence of such a room. As the ribbon on the box comes undone, Holless groans in frustration, having wanted to open it himself. Tyeris, holding a small doll of Luster, cheerfully urges him to open it. Luster asks for his thoughts. He replies that he now understands why the item was sent to him without his knowledge. Tyeris looks at the small, book-like object and asks Holless if this, too, is something he doesn't need. With a sudden, intense realization, Holless declares that this single item will advance his research by 10 years. His declaration sends a shockwave through the room. Tyeris and Luster both gasp, stunned by the magnitude of his claim, while Holless himself clutches the item, seemingly overwhelmed by his discovery. He examines the device in his gloved hand, recognizing its immense power. He thinks to himself that obtaining this was an incredible stroke of luck, a complete victory from his point of view. With newfound excitement, he explains that his research follows a unique path and that he had been avoiding this particular method. He surmises that the Balsail Kingdom must have sent it without understanding its true nature, calling it the greatest gift he could have received. Luster asks if it is truly that significant. Holless elaborates, saying that if his efforts in subjugating the Demon Lord are well regarded, he might be asked to continue working at the castle and to incorporate the hero into the kingdom's forces. He recalls presenting this very research proposal to the king, who had nodded emphatically in agreement, showing his full support. Tyeris, however, expresses her concern, asking if he truly intends to work for the kingdom again. She reminds him that as long as he is employed by the castle, he cannot enter the Kinsekai Great Labyrinth. She warns that the royal family's affection has waned and that he should leave the castle. Luster interjects, explaining to Tyeris that they can now cancel the Tyrant Kingdom's debt. She calls the device a wonderful gift, one they wouldn't have received otherwise. Tyeris considers this, realizing that with the debt gone, the nobles will have no more leverage, though a flicker of doubt remains. She then turns to Holless with a confident smirk. She tells him that now he will understand the true weight of the title hero. She suggests that if the nobles cause trouble even after the dead is gone, they should make an example of few of them. Her words prove prophetic. The very next day, the kingdom's debt is declared null and void. The king, holding the official notice, stares at it in utter disbelief, having reread the same letter 5 times. At the gates of a large estate, 2 young women watch the entrance. One of them, with long blonde hair, observes that another new hero candidate has arrived today. Her companion, a woman with short hair and wearing light armor, thoughtfully agrees. She remarks that with the subjugation of the Demon King now finished, many are returning. Suddenly, a large, armored guard with a thick mustache accosts the blonde candidate, grabbing her arm and yelling at her not to touch him. At the same time, a young boy with a speaking trumpet shouts for the brat to be driven away. Caught completely by surprise, the candidate asks what the man is doing. The short-haired woman calmly announces, "You pass." In the background, the commotion ends as the boy leads the armored guard away toward a carriage, revealing the incident was a staged test. The blonde candidate looks on, still bewildered. From a hidden location, Duke Rujisoku watches the scene through a speaking trumpet. A lecherous grin spreads across his face as he thinks to himself that, based on the rumored appearance of the hero community, he will make them all his lovers. While Holless quietly reads the morning paper, Luster notes that the nobles are getting restless again. Their quiet moment is shattered when a short-haired woman in armor bursts in, calling for Lungia. Holless simply remarks that she's arrived too early. Suddenly, a gauntlet hand extends a letter towards them. An unseen person announces that an individual from the ducal house of the Tyrant Kingdom has arrived with a strange summons for them to follow. Reading the summons, Holless and Luster find themselves outside, facing an irate nobleman. Flanked by guards, the man bellows that they are late and demands an explanation for being made to wait. He puffs out his chest with indignation, loudly declaring himself to be Ashton Lectinitus, head of the Lectinitus ducal house of the Tyrant Kingdom, questioning how they could possibly be unaware of his station. From behind a bar gate, he looks down on them and asks their business. Luster, unfazed, replies that this is the first she has heard of any such matter. The Duke smirks, judging her appearance to be to his liking. He informs her that he has decided to invite her to his estate to be his mistress. Luster immediately and bluntly refuses his offer. His expression sours at the rejection. He scoffs at her defiance, questioning what a citizen of a poor nation that can only produce metal for swords could possibly do against him. Referencing the blade she forged during the demon subjugation, Luster's gaze hardens. She warns him that his bravado is temporary and offers to demonstrate the sharpness of her sword on him, causing the Duke to recoil in surprise. He quickly recovers, bursting into a loud, dismissive laugh. He reminds her that as citizens of their country, they are obligated to repay the nation's debts, and that the people must work to do so. At this, Holless steps forward, arms crossed. He calmly asks if the Duke intends to lend money to Queen Lucia, then states that he will simply repay the debt on the spot. The Duke, caught off guard, accuses him of planning to charge exorbitant interest, dismissing him as an uneducated commoner. The Duke, Ashton Lectinitus, remained unmoved by the offer. His eyes narrowed as he declared his intention to use his authority over Princess Lucia to force the Lectinitus dukedom to pay him 100 million in gold. His outrageous demand drew a sharp, irritated reaction from Luster. The Duke elaborated with a smug grin, explaining that 100 million in gold was the price he was placing on every single member of the hero's community. She stepped forward, trembling with indignation, and questioned how he could possibly expect them to be able to prepare such a sum. Beside her, Holless calmly remarked that it seemed highly improbable. She pressed him further, challenging the legality of his actions. She questioned whether it was even possible for him to unilaterally demand payment of a debt by leveraging his authority over Princess Lucia. The Duke scoffed at her protest, stating that, as a creditor, he had every right to demand payment from a debtor, especially when the cause was clear. He added condescendingly that the common folk were of little concern. Holless immediately countered that his reasoning was still fundamentally wrong. Their argument was suddenly interrupted by a woman's voice calling out for Lord Ashton. Following her were 2 armored guards, each carrying a large, open crate filled with metal ingots. They reported that they had found the precious metals lined up in the warehouse, and that they could have carried even more if not for some unspecified interference. The sight of the guards and their cargo drew Luster's immediate attention. She demanded to know who they were, a sentiment Holless echoed from his position near a barred gate. The group of heroes who had been searching for Lungia looked on as well. The Duke ignored her question entirely, instead addressing his men. He declared that everything belonging to the heroes' community was now part of his personal collection and ordered them to load it all onto a carriage. This blatant act of theft was too much for Holless, who stomped his foot on the stone path in sheer frustration. Luster, hand to her head, could only look on in disbelief at such an unsalvageable display of greed. As Duke Lectinitus gloats, Holless calmly states that it is most convenient for this country to hold the exclusive rights to the Kensikai vein. The Duke's face contorts in a furious sneer, questioning if Holless's words are meant to be an obstruction. The accusation leaves Holless momentarily stunned. Suddenly, the Duke collapses to his knees, sweating and trembling as he begs for forgiveness. From a distance, Holless calls out, asking what's wrong and why he is bowing to a commoner in public. The public spectacle draws a crowd, and one man raises a device to capture the image. An official shouts for everyone to raise their heads and stop taking pictures without permission. He smirks, remarking to Luster that this will surely be the top story in tomorrow's newspaper. She looks at him, noting that he seems pleased to have his name remembered as the Duke continues to grovel. As the Duke and his guards finally retreat with the stolen goods, he screams a vow to make them regret the humiliation. Luster shouts back, demanding they leave the metal behind. She turns to Holless, insisting they must give chase. He readily agrees, as the townspeople watch their hard-earned metal being carried away. As they prepare to run, a young woman stops them. She reminds Holless of his earlier statement, that this country holds the exclusive rights to the Kinsekai vein. He turns, acknowledging her question. The memory of Queen Lucia's words surfaces. She had explained with a wink that for him, her family, the royal family, being at the top is what is most convenient. He clarifies the situation for Luster. Deep within the Kinsekai vein, another dungeon is hidden. There's something they need inside it, but entry requires a specific, unobtainable key. Meanwhile, inside a well-appointed room, Queen Lucia cheerfully explained a piece of history to her companion. She revealed that 8 great clans have persisted since the world's earliest days, and her own lineage, the House of Chaoston, is one of them. This was news to Luster, who admitted she had never heard of these clans before. As she moved, she conceded that the Queen's claim must be true. Holless elaborated on the strategic importance of this fact. The dungeon they sought was located deep within the Kinsekai vein, in territory controlled by one of those very clans. A map illustrated their position. The capital city of Rappies sat directly in the path to their goal. He continued, explaining that even if he were to become the Queen's consort, it would not grant him access. Luster understood the implication. Queen Lucia was being deliberately placed in a difficult position to avoid this very outcome. Elsewhere, Duke Lectinitus seethed with rage inside his carriage. He cursed, fuming over the humiliation he had endured. He had planned to use the authority of the hero community to force a repayment obligation onto Queen Lucia and her subjects, but that was now ruined. He stewed in his anger, convinced those ignorant commoners couldn't comprehend the true terror of power. However, he acknowledged a tactical error. The forces he had brought to the capital were insufficient to control the heroes. The memory of Holless and Luster's mocking expressions fueled his fury. His carriage ground to a halt before a formidable gate. He had reached his decision. The target he must now strike was the Chaoston Palace itself. As the heavy gates swung open, the guards and an attendant within were taken by surprise. One of the soldiers stepped forward, demanding to know who they were. The man identified himself with imperious authority, Duke Ashton Lectinitus of the Time Kingdom. He warned the palace guards to stand aside or face the consequences, an act the guards immediately recognized as outrageously reckless. With a commanding gesture, he ordered his soldiers to advance. The commotion reached the Queen's chambers, where she and her companion watched in alarm as Luster blurred into action, moving to intercept the uninvited Duke and his men. She stands her ground as Duke Lectinitus and his armored soldiers barge into the chamber. The Duke addresses the Queen, demanding she pay a contribution for his cooperation. Behind Luster, a young girl named Aderica angrily demands to know who the intruders are, telling them to stop their ruckus. He introduces himself with puffed-up pride, declaring that he is the Prime Minister of the world's greatest nation, the Diamante Kingdom, and the head of the House of Lectinitus. He arrogantly asks if they truly believe they can ignore his opinion. He scoffs at the very idea, asserting that they wouldn't dare ignore him. He warns that if this nation were to acknowledge his demands, it would be tantamount to becoming a vassal state of the Diamante Kingdom. He then pulls out a document, casually remarking that in this world, the strong dictate the terms. He dismisses their nation as one that can only mine a small amount of metal, deeming it fit only for servitude. In response, Luster steps forward, presenting a document of her own. She points out that unilaterally imposing such an obligation is unprecedented. Furthermore, she states that while the World Council's regulations do not explicitly forbid such an act, they certainly do not permit it. Aderica, standing beside her, questions if she truly believes such a legalistic argument will prevail in this situation. Her doubt is validated as the Duke declares that words are clearly not getting through. With a sharp crack, he stomps his foot down, crushing the document on the floor. Aderica cries out in shock at the blatant disrespect. Her protest is cut short as she looks up in stunned silence. The tips of 2 swords now pointed directly at her throat. In a flash, Luster draws her own blade, its edge resting against the neck of one of the guards. With a chillingly calm smile, she asks them if they are truly serious about this course of action. The Duke remains utterly unfazed. He points a finger forward, refusing to repeat himself and declaring that a nation such as theirs is perfectly suited for servitude. Elsewhere, Queen Lucia speaks to a concerned Aderica. She acknowledges that history often overlooks the conquered, stating that she recognizes the historical precedent of one nation seizing another. Back in the throne room, Luster's eyes narrow with fury. She declares that if the Duke and his men believe they can act with such impunity, they are gravely mistaken. Her defiance enrages one of the armored guards, who bellows at her for her insolence, dismissing her threat as nothing more than a small twig. Before the guard can act, a calm voice cuts through the tension. Holless leans against a nearby wall, arms crossed, admonishing them for creating such an atmosphere in the royal office. The animal-eared girl calls his name in surprise. He steps forward, turning his attention to Luster. He questions why she hasn't drawn her sword, pointing out that since the Duke's men have made violent threats, it could be considered a declaration of war, and her retaliation would be justified. The Duke sputters in disbelief that a mere hero would dare address him so. The Duke's eyes widen in recognition. He realizes Holless is the one who was tailing them, connecting his presence to the palpable tension he sensed throughout the palace. As he puts the pieces together, Holless and Luster walk past the guards to confront him directly. He scoffs dismissively. With a sneer, the Duke proclaims himself a figure of absolute authority and warns the commoner not to get carried away. In silent, unified defiance, Holless and Luster take a firm step forward, closing the distance between themselves and the arrogant nobleman. The Duke gestures grandly toward his soldiers, boasting that with a single order, he could have the entire capital surrounded. This, he declares, is true power. This is military might. He bellows that a powerless commoner cannot defy him, a wielder of authority. Holless calmly counters this outburst. He explains that authority is not about brute force, but about establishing a security guarantee, the right to be protected, even if one is not deemed correct. He continues his declaration, stating that those who enslave other nations and use war as a pretext are not figures of authority, but criminals. In response to his accusation, one of the Duke's guards roars that Holless and his companions are the real criminals. He orders his men to seize Lungia and take her away. As Luster is roughly grabbed and falls to the ground, the onlookers, including Queen Lucia and Ederica, gasp in shock. Luster cries out in surprise, questioning why she is being taken. As the mustachioed guard raises his sword to strike, he observes that Holless shows no sign of resistance. Holless simply watches the descending blade, his expression unreadable as he assesses his opponents. He then explodes into motion, delivering a powerful punch directly to the guard's faceplate with a sickening crunch. As he strikes, he tells the man that they are equals in this confrontation. The force of the blow sends the guard stumbling backward. Seeing this, Luster, still restrained, calls Holless an idiot for escalating the situation. The remaining guards immediately swarm Holless, beating him down to the ground as Ederica looks on, horrified. A sudden silence falls over the room. Holless remains kneeling on the floor, apparently subdued. From his vantage point, Duke Lectinitus stares, confused by the abrupt end to the scuffle. His confusion turns to triumphant laughter. The Duke points at the kneeling figure, declaring that by attacking his men, Holless has given him the perfect excuse to execute him. Still on the floor, Holless calmly asks if the Duke has failed to notice something. The mustachioed guard touches his face, stunned to find no injury where he was struck. A smirk plays on Holless's lips as he explains that he healed the wound at the very moment of impact, ensuring only the sensation of pain would remain. This revelation terrifies the guard. The Duke, however, flies into a rage, dismissing the feat as some kind of absurd trick. Refusing to accept what he's heard, he bellows for his men to kill Holless, but the guard who was struck remains paralyzed by fear, unable to act. He rises to his feet, calmly facing the stunned Duke and his men. He questions their hesitation, sarcastically noting that in a nation of slavers, the death of one more person should be of no consequence. He urges them to get on with it, his challenge leaving them speechless and sweating with apprehension. His display of power sends one of the Duke's guards stumbling backward in shock, a movement that catches the wide-eyed attention of Ederica. He glances over to see two armored men collapsed on the floor, one of them coughing weakly from the phantom assault. He apologizes to the conscious guard, explaining that he is reversing the effect from a king's office. He advises the man to rest, warning that someone brought back from the brink of death is bound to feel ill. The guard's face contorts, his cheeks puffing out as he fights a wave of nausea. The Duke, trembling with rage, demands to know who Holless is. Holless calmly replies that he is merely a golem master, adding that while it was only 3 soldiers, it's not a level of threat the Duke can handle. He refuses to acknowledge the display, sputtering that it must have been some kind of trick. In response, Holless cracks his knuckles, stating that if words won't get through, he'll have to teach the Duke with body language. Before he can act, however, Ederica surges forward, her fist connecting squarely with the Duke's jaw in a stunning blow. With the Duke reeling from the punch, Holless decides it's best to leave him and return the goods to the Timon embassy. Ederica agrees, adding that they must write a formal letter of protest. He muses aloud that international relations are complex, especially when weapons are involved in a protest. It's a shame, he notes to Ederica, that their country is so small. Elsewhere, Queen Lucia discusses the incident with her companions over tea. She admits she can hardly believe the reports of Holless taking down 3 soldiers. Tyrus, serving them, confesses that she was also quite surprised by the news. Luster approaches Holless as he sits reading. She remarks that for a master, a technique of that level is only to be expected. She then addresses him directly, a question in her voice. Master, Holless quietly reads a newspaper, his eyes scanning a headline that announces the public condemnation of the Timid Kingdom. As he reads, Luster leans over the counter, noting that the photograph used in the article is from a previous incident. She asks for confirmation that this is what will anger Ashton. Beside her, Ederica's expression is fraught with worry. She is certain he will come after them again. Their conversation is joined by Tyrus, who confirms that despite the thorough defeat of the Duke, reports of retaliation are already numerous. She explains that while violence against the nobility is rare in the Tyrant Kingdom, the consequences that follow are often severe. Elsewhere, Duke Lectinitus seethes, his face contorted with fury. He cannot forgive the commoner who inflicted such pain and shattered his sense of superiority. Back at the residence, Tyeris calmly assesses the Duke's character as being too small. She elaborates that a person's true worth is shown through their capacity for forgiveness and growth from hardship, qualities she believes the Duke and his men utterly lack. Holless, relaxing on a sofa, remarks that even if the Duke retaliates, it might not go well for him. He muses that it's best to forget past pains quickly, noting that people in the Duke's position tend to simply eliminate anything that causes them stress. The Duke's intentions become clear as he stands before his armored soldiers. He warns them that they will likely face the same injuries again within a few days. In front of his grand estate, he addresses his men, declaring that the hero has committed an unforgivable act against him, the head of the Lectinitus house. He twists the narrative, claiming this is an unacceptable act from one who subjugated the Demon King. With a commanding gesture, he orders his men to capture everyone involved and bring them before him. He promises to share the spoils with them upon their success. A cruel smile plays on the Duke's lips. He thinks to himself that no matter how powerful a hero might be, there's always a weakness to be found and exploited. He cries out in shock as his armor guards are swiftly and forcefully subdued around him, collapsing to the ground without a fight. Stumbling back, a dreadful feeling washes over him. He recognizes this sensation, wondering why he has encountered so many monstrously powerful individuals lately. The source of the pressure reveals herself. It is Luster, who remarks that with the Demon King's recent activities, she feels she should have just attacked the royal capital herself. She explains to the terrified Duke that once the Demon King subjugates a human, their will is completely dominated. There is no way to break the control. The only option left is to kill them. Her eyes narrow with cold fury as she declares her intention to make an example of him. However, she then waves a dismissive hand, telling him to leave immediately. She offers that if he goes now, she will let him depart with his life intact. As the Duke seems to contemplate this, she instantly closes the distance and grips his face. She warns him that she has no interest in his master's motives, but if he proves to be an obstacle, he will be eliminated. She releases him, walking away as the Duke and his men lie defeated on the ground. Nearby, Holless watches the scene and remarks that he is looking forward to what comes next. An attendant bursts into the royal chamber, urgently addressing the king. He reports that Duke Ashton Lectinitus has made a move against Princess Lucia. As evidence of the escalating situation, he announces that Luster's forces have surrounded the main base. With a grim expression, the attendant delivers the final, shocking news. The heroes have been completely annihilated. He clutches a letter, explaining that he has received it from the hero. The king, slumped over his desk in despair, mutters that he doesn't want to read it. From the side, Luster watches with a severe gaze. The attendant, Holless, presses on, stating that the letter is addressed to your majesty and insists that it must be read. He holds out the sealed letter, countering the king's dejection by telling him that is not the case and urging him to look at it. The king takes the letter, his brow furrowed with worry as he examines it. Holless watches him, realizing that the hero seems to possess more substance than he had previously assumed. Leaning back, the weary monarch asks about the letter's contents, cynically wondering if it's an attempt to shift the blame for the attack onto him. Holless clarifies that, put simply, the letter is a summons for an emergency world conference. His eyes narrow as he processes the information. The king deduces that during this conference, the hero intends to find fault with the other heroes and gather them all in one place. He understands the true, chilling purpose, to wipe them all out in a single stroke. Holless looks on, stunned by the revelation. The scene shifts to a gathering of nobles. Duke Lectinitus remarks that calling a world conference will draw the participation of many nations, presenting a perfect opportunity to find fault with their rivals. Another noble adds that while many high-ranking individuals were expected to aid in the subjugation of the Demon King, the truth is that those very people did nothing. Holless stands among them, listening intently. The noble continues his point, questioning just how many of those who failed to even try were present. Holless quietly confirms to the king that this is indeed the truth of the matter. Standing alone, Holless reflects on the letter's contents. It explicitly states that the hero has no interest in the good or evil of justice. He is left to wonder what could possibly motivate such a person, concluding only that their capacity is immense. He stands before the king, who muses that he doesn't want to lose to a mere 17-year-old girl. The king adds that it's also a matter of gaining experience and developing one's own vessel. Holless quietly agrees. The king, hand to his forehead in frustration, reflects on the World Conference. He recalls that the religious organization once held overwhelming power, but after a great incident, they lost it. He notes that what was built up by people claiming divine authority can no longer be called a religious body. Holless explains that the purpose of the conference is likely to make the nobles aware of the hero's existence. The king, listening intently, agrees with this assessment. The king imagines the effect this will have. The mansion of the state, where his earls and dukes have been causing problems, will be shaken to its core. The very mention of the hero will stir the blood of the divine journey. This divine journey is a concept composed of three pillars: the theocratic nation, representing God, the bloodline nation, representing blood, and the adventurers representing the journey. It is said that when humans belong to one of these, they gain a power that social scientists call the Adventurers Guild. The king, having considered the implications, lets out a sigh. He concludes that the hero will undoubtedly make an appearance. Holless confirms, stating there is no mistake. He then asks Holless if he thinks the hero's master will also come. Holless turns, declaring that if his master won't go, then he will go in his stead. The king questions his reason. He explains that he cannot show his face as the master because it would tarnish his disciples' achievements. The king seems to understand, remarking that he thought Holless would come. The king, now writing at his desk, muses that whether the world is as the hero imagines it to be is a good basis for judgment. He wonders what would happen if their ambitions were to run out, and how the cost in Dragonstone Kingdom would be protected. He concludes that everything else would need to be discarded for their sake. Holless suggests that might be the case, but he believes there are those with an unwavering conviction that the strong must protect the weak. He asserts that his master has no interest in subjective justice. The power his master wields, he concludes, is for the sole purpose of protecting someone. He listened as the king continued his tirade, accusing him of shamelessness for making claims to the public in the space provided in the castle. The king questioned whether Holless truly believed he had the power to protect anyone, given the authority he possessed. The king leaned in, his voice sharp, demanding to know if Holless expected gratitude for what he had done, warning him that such words would not be returned. The sudden intensity of the question startled Holless, his eyes widening in surprise. Turning away, the king elaborated on his philosophy. He explained that rewarding achievements is merely an evaluation of merit, not an act of worship toward the hero. The true deficiency in the hero who defeated the demon lord, he asserted, was a lack of gratitude. He mused that people subconsciously hold the belief that the world must be saved by a hero. This belief permeated the very air of the kingdom, a sprawling city now at peace, a world the hero had saved. Back in the throne room, the king revealed the hero's recent demands, that all the rabble be summoned to the meeting hall. However, he noted that attendance had dwindled to nothing. This, he stressed, gave the next meeting immense importance. Holless processed the information, his expression turning grave as he murmured that such a situation was impossible. The king simply gazed out the window, his thoughts seemingly elsewhere. His gaze hardened with resolve. He declared that as the leader of the most powerful nation in the world, he would perform an act to praise the world itself. Meanwhile, in a grand assembly hall, the hero Luster addressed a council of nobles. She loudly proclaimed that the facts she had just laid out formed the very foundation of Duke Ashton Lectenitus's character. She challenged anyone present to voice their objections, asserting that it was preposterous for such a man to be the prime minister of the time and kingdom. Her challenge was met with an immediate uproar. Duke Lectenitus roared that it was a noble's natural right to dispose of commoners. Zate slammed his hand on the table, adding that their accomplishments were validated by the throne, not the populace. Another noble accused her of being a mere doll playing at heroism, incapable of understanding true justice. Amid the chaos, Duke Rujisoku declared that the nobles did not recognize her contributions to the World Conference, made with wealth from the Demon Lord's subjugation, and demanded she incur more debt in the name of saving the world. She stood silently through the barrage of accusations and demands, her eyes closed. The nobles' voices crescendoed, insisting that on top of everything else, she must agree to an engagement with the prince of the time and kingdom, the most powerful nation in the world. The nobles' demands escalated. One, a man with a prominent ruff, declared that it was the duty of the kingdom's executives to forge relationships with the great nations. He insisted that as a hero, she must use her knowledge and skills to guide the world through whatever is to come. A sharp crack echoed as her gauntlet hand slammed down on the table, her voice cutting through the noise with a single command for silence. Her eyes blazed with fury as she accused them of being far too selfish. This outburst drew a sharp rebuke from Duke Lectenitus, who called her insolent for defying the will of his house. Another noble, seeing her unrepentant, remarked that she seemed to have no intention of apologizing. She rose to her feet, her voice ringing with conviction. Her master, she stated, had given her the power she wielded, the very power that allowed her to subjugate the Demon King. She then threw the question back at them. What had any of them ever accomplished? From a hidden vantage point, Holless watched the scene unfold. He knew the answer. They had accomplished nothing. Therefore, they had no right to criticize someone who had achieved so much. The nobles in his view were left stunned and speechless. Elsewhere, the fur-collared king also observed the confrontation. He reflected on their audacity to look down on the one who defeated the demon lord from a safe distance, as if to deny her very existence. Luster's rage simmered beneath the surface. She clenched her fists, thinking to herself how these ignorant bloodlines were trying her patience. Her intense gaze then shifted across the hall, landing on the king, standing in a distant doorway. She wondered who he was, questioning why he would wait for her to show affection to the world. The king stepped forward, his voice carrying across the room. He told her she may not understand, but since the day of that ceremony, she has been known as Hero Lungia of Balsail Time. His words struck her with force. She retorted that this gathering of kings was meant to be a place where she could call out and brand those who caused trouble, using her power. She told him pointedly that he had no business being there. The king calmly agreed with her assessment. He explained that he, too, had come to find a hero to cause trouble for. However, he felt it would be a waste to simply call them out, and so he came to speak with the hero who had come to cause trouble for him. He addressed the stunned nobles, his voice cutting through the tension. He declared that he had not come to seek their approval, but simply to state what he intended to say. Her face fell into shadow, her eyes glowing with defiance. She challenged him to speak his mind. The king began, formally addressing her as Hero Lungia, formerly Luster, and also acknowledging her master, Holless. He then expressed his heartfelt gratitude for her subjugation of the demon lord and for saving the world. She looked on, startled by the sudden change in tone. He continued, explaining that the permanent council of the hero community had evaluated her achievements and bestowed rewards upon the kings, but in doing so, they had forgotten something of utmost importance. As the other nobles reacted with shock, he turned his attention back to Luster, clarifying that his statement was indeed one of thanks. She replied coolly, acknowledging her own growth, but admitting that she found his praise deeply unpleasant. She demanded to know what he was truly trying to say. He agreed, stating that they had all treated the name of hero too lightly. He found it unforgivable that a world saved should have no potential, and declared that he would not stand for it. He would show her that potential. Luster immediately questioned his authority to do so. The king's demeanor shifted. He acknowledged the powerful pressure a hero could exert. Then, as an immense aura began to flare around him, he asked aloud if this was how it was done. The aura erupted, flooding the chamber with crushing force. The assembled nobles cried out and collapsed, unable to withstand the overwhelming pressure. She braced herself against the invisible onslaught, raising a gauntlet hand as she fought to remain standing. She stood her ground, completely unfazed by the crushing pressure. With a simple, outstretched hand, she not only withstood the king's immense aura, but halted it completely, causing the monarch to recoil in surprise. The fur-collared king lets out a booming laugh. He presses a hand to his forehead, admitting that while he knew it was a reckless gamble, he never truly expected to lose. As Luster walks away, the sound of her footsteps echoing softly, the king watches her go. He remarks that it is quite shameless of him to do this, reflecting that his kingdom has committed many such unforgivable acts in the past. His attention then shifts to the young man, standing near a grand doorway. The king declares that he must thank him and wants his retainers to meet him as well. He calls out, "You're Holless, aren't you?" The young man looks up, surprised to be addressed. Before Holless can respond, the king bows deeply. He offers a profound apology, stating that Holless worked for his kingdom for a long time without receiving any reward. Holless simply watches, his expression unreadable. He remains bowed as Luster tells him to raise his head. Holless speaks, mentioning that he quite liked the bonus antenna that came with an item. He then requests that, clarifying that he worked in the Tyrant Kingdom and possesses the armor. Luster observes that Holless seems to feel more of an attraction to the Dragonstone Kingdom. The king considers this and declares that if that is the case, then there is no debt between them. Holless confirms, asking if that settles the matter. The king straightens up, rubbing his head. He admits he expected Holless to tell him never to return to the castle, and that he had already given up on that future. He concludes that with Holless's power, his kingdom will grow stronger. His demeanor suddenly sharpens. Pointing directly at Holless, the king identifies him as the hero's master and proposes a challenge, a single clash to test his might. Holless appears confused by the sudden request. The king, however, smiles knowingly, explaining that a single exchange of blows is more meaningful than 1,000 words, and that Holless should understand. A look of realization dawns on Holless's face. He surmises that the king has read that book. With a calm smile, he accepts the challenge. The king's face twists into a fierce, eager grin, anticipating the confrontation. He stood resolute in the vast, empty hall, the space between him and his two observers crackling with unspoken tension. As he faced Holless, the king let out a strained grunt, admitting with some surprise that he hadn't expected the young man to even be able to stand before him. He then glanced toward Lungia, acknowledging her own surprise. He remarked on the irony that the hero of that era, a man once so ignorant and incompetent, could become the king of such a world. His expression softened as he continued, explaining that the very world she saved possessed this kind of potential, and that the blood flowing in their veins was still brimming with possibility. He reached out a hand toward her, pleading for her to wait just a little longer so that he might repay the world for its love. She remained silent, her gaze steady as she considered his plea. After a moment, she conceded that he was right. She confessed that she had once believed it would be fine to simply abandon a world like this. Her mind, however, had changed. Proving it here and now, she implied, was the purpose of this confrontation. The king then offered a definition of his station. A hero, he explained, is defined by their accomplishments, but a king is defined by their very existence. Hearing this, Lungia's resolve hardened. Placing a hand over her heart, she declared that the words of gratitude for the demon lord's subjugation were a promise they must never forget. The fur-collared king, looking weary, addresses the assembled nobles, stating that this concludes his final duty. Holless steps forward, offering a hand over some documents, an offer the Tyrant noble gratefully accepts, asking that they be sent to the castle. In response, the Tyrant noble erupts in fury, declaring that he accepts the punishment but finds it utterly wrong. He protests that the king is treating him, a border earl, with such disdain, especially when he is supposed to be on equal footing with a hero. His outburst prompts Lungia to intervene. She challenges his position, reminding him that as a duke of the Melhade kingdom, a close ally of Diamante, he should know better than to think she would simply return to her kingdom. She firmly states she will never allow them to be thrown into a dungeon. She is met with a sharp retort from the Tiamant noble, who claims she is no longer the wise ruler she once was. He declares that they will show her the correct path themselves, and then calls out, asking if anyone present can use communication magic. He then issues a command, his voice ringing with authority. He orders the summoning of the heavenly dragon guy Gigant to the capital of the Diamante kingdom as a bright light erupts in the center of the room. As the summoning begins, a separate plot unfolds. A hooded duke like Tinnitus reveals that the summoning stone is stored underground in his ducal house and gives an order to quickly summon and suppress the king. He walks through the town, smirking to himself. The duke believes that by guiding the king in what he deems the right direction, the people of the capital will have to make a sacrifice, and he will be praised for it. Back in the chamber, another noble asks the fur-collared king if he will be all right, referencing a small-scale experiment in the Dragonstone Kingdom that apparently had poor results. The king confirms grimly that this time, he will use his full power, as failure is not an option. His grim declaration is cut short by the chamber doors being thrown open with a resounding crash, causing the entire assembly of nobles to turn in shock. In the doorway, a royal guard announces that they have intercepted the communication magic. Holless stands beside them, looking at the conspirators and stating that it appears they wish to become international criminals. He found the king in a state of utter fury, shouting about the noble's treachery. Placing a hand on the monarch's shoulder, Holless calmly urged him to regain his composure. The king, however, refused to be calmed. He turned on Holless, shouting for him to be quiet and reminding him of the recent incident involving Guy Gigant. He continued, reasoning that with the dwarf's sanctuary subjugated and the holy sword stolen, it was imperative that Holless take action. Just then, a firm knock sounded at the door. The king granted permission to enter. An attendant announced the arrival of the hero Lungia and Master Holless, as Lungia, clad in full armor, stepped into the room. Holless stepped forward, confirming to the king that he had come to the capital for a specific reason. He stated that there was just one thing he needed to borrow. The king, intrigued, asked what it was. He specified his request, to borrow the antenna located beneath the Tiamant kingdom. Holless acknowledged that it was not a normal request and would require the use of golem, something he wouldn't typically ask to do. The king remarked that Holless was well informed. He explained the difficulties. The antenna was large. Releasing it required extensive paperwork with a long waiting period, and the documents were specifically those of the Tiamant kingdom. Holless simply replied that he was aware of the rules, having worked in the castle for many years. The king considered this for a moment, murmuring in understanding. With a decisive clench of his fist, the king declared that since the matter concerned borrowing the antenna, he would grant it. He gave Holless his permission to use it without hesitation, to which Holless readily agreed. He extended his hand, formally entrusting the capital to Holless. Holless grasped it firmly, accepting the responsibility and promising to see the task through. He decided against waiting, stating that preparing the necessary documents would take too long. With a determined look, he announced he would go himself. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, the hero Lungia spoke with the king. She explained that there was a significant difference between the battle she envisioned and the one her master imagined. The king, listening intently, then inquired about transfer magic. The king stroked his beard, musing that her vision of battle wasn't particularly useful as a reference. As he spoke, a strange, reptilian creature submerged in a font-like basin suddenly activated. Deep within a hidden chamber, similarly cloaked figures stood watch over their own arcane font. Immediately, the sky above a distant city tore open. Pillars of intense light descended from the heavens, striking the ground as a nearby tower began to tremble violently. From the epicenter of the celestial bombardment, a colossal, dark dragon materialized, its maw open in a silent roar. Below, citizens scattered in panic, their shouts echoing through the streets as they stared up in horror at the terrifying apparition. Panic erupts in the city streets as a colossal, winged beast descends from the sky. A man shouts in terror at its immense size, urging everyone to flee for their lives. As the creature prepares to unleash a blinding blast of energy from its maw, a lone warrior in dark armor steps into its path. He calmly observes the gathering light, recognizing the imminent danger. It unleashes the beam, a torrent of destructive power that tears through the street. Civilians dive for cover as the warrior stands his ground amidst the chaos. The beast pauses, a low growl rumbling in its chest. It seems to be thinking to itself, annoyed that it has to waste time earning its meal before the hero's master arrives. The warrior clicks his tongue, annoyed. He understands the situation perfectly. The members of the former hero's community are away in the Dragonstone Kingdom, and the other executives are in a distant land. They won't be coming to help. He smirks, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He taunts the creature, saying it should have called for at least an SS rank opponent if it wanted a real challenge. He declares that an ordinary A rank like Deity of the Twilight is more than enough, then shouts for the beast to come down and fight. Enraged by the blatant disrespect, the beast dives from the sky, its claws extended as it plummets toward the warrior. He remains utterly unfazed as the creature looms over him, roaring directly in his face. The warrior scoffs, stating that this display is hardly its true power and that its tantrum is pathetic. Meanwhile, high above the city, Holless pilots a small flying craft. He observes the scene, recalling that Duke Ballsail had issued an evacuation order, but something has clearly changed. His eyes widen in surprise as he spots the lone warrior standing atop a massive cannon, holding the line against the beast. He realizes with a start that the one holding out is Deity of the Twilight. From his vantage point, he watched the warrior, Deity, brace himself before the colossal beast. Deity grimaced, muttering that trading an arm for an hour was a better deal than he'd expected. The creature let out a low growl, turning its massive head to fix its gaze upon him, as if acknowledging the challenge. Observing from his craft, Holless recognized the man below. He noted with a smirk that the hero's master had finally made his appearance. Without warning, he fired a blast of energy from a weapon mounted on his vehicle, directly at the warrior on the ground. Deity's head snapped up in surprise. The force of the unexpected attack sent him flying backward, a cry of pain torn from his lips. He landed hard, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared up at the man in the sky who had just attacked him. Holless looked down, his expression unreadable. He stated that if the man was indeed Deity of the Twilight, then the situation made sense, as there were no other casualties. He then tossed a small, glowing cube from his craft, telling Deity to remove his limiter and come at him with full force, admitting that he himself was not in top condition. As Deity began to run, the winged beast loomed in the background. The cube transformed, summoning a massive, rocky creature beneath Holless, standing atop the newly formed Gigant. He invited Deity to join him in a warm-up. Before Deity could react, Holless directed his Gigant to strike. The rocky behemoth's claws slammed into the winged beast, which shrieked in agony as the blow connected, sending it stumbling. He stood his ground as the massive, draconic creature lunged, its claws extended and maw wide in a deafening roar. As the beast roared, he launched himself into the air, pulling his fist back for a powerful blow. His fist connected with the creature's jaw, the impact sending a shockwave through the air and violently snapping its head to the side. With the beast momentarily stunned, he paused to reflect. He had diverted the bone golem's performance towards stabilization, and as a result, his own magical power and combat strength were not as high as he had anticipated. He considered that to increase his own golem's power, he would need to activate it and directly link its operational ability to his own calculation power. Prioritizing stabilization for now wasn't a bad choice, but he noted with some concern that the records and the practical application were proving to be quite different. His contemplation was cut short as the creature unleashed a powerful breath attack. He leaped away, narrowly avoiding the blast, thinking to himself that it was a shame. He explained aloud that the creature's breath attack expends all of its magic, which it then seeks to stabilize. This, he declared, was the power of Kikumen, the ability to decipher the very nature of magic. He reasoned that a breath attack is less stable than the surrounding air, meaning a single, well-placed punch could neutralize it. In response, the beast roared, warning him not to underestimate humans. Ignoring his lecture entirely, the creature fired another artless breath attack. He grimaced, realizing this was a bad move on the beast's part. He dodged again, a flicker of annoyance on his face. He understood now. The creature hadn't comprehended his words, but it had figured out the mechanics of his punch. The beast pressed its attack, using its powerful limbs to create an updraft that prevented him from stabilizing his footing. Leaping away, he yelled that this was a foolish power play and demanded the creature behave itself. He braced for the beast's attack, but was stunned when a spiky-haired warrior suddenly appeared, landing a powerful punch directly on the dragon's snout. As Holless watched in shock, the newcomer roared at the creature to be quiet. The impact sent a visible shockwave across the dragon's jaw. Holless could only stare, questioning who this unexpected combatant could possibly be. The sheer force of the blow sent the massive creature stumbling backward, its head thrown back from the concussive force. From his position on the ground, Holless watched the scene unfold in disbelief. As he got to his feet, the mysterious warrior landed nearby. Without looking back at the beast, the man informed Holless that his preparations were now complete. The dragon, however, recovered instantly and charged forward with blinding speed. Holless realized with a start that it wasn't teleportation, but an incredibly fast dash. He dodged just in time, clicking his tongue in frustration. Having missed its physical strike, the beast immediately began firing a volley of energy blasts from its mouth. Unable to evade them all, he was struck by one of the blasts, the force of the impact sending him flying backward through the air. He crashed violently into a large crystalline formation, shattering it completely. Above, the dragon circled, preparing to dive for another attack. As the beast swooped down, a massive ball of energy began to form in its open maw. Holless glared up at it, defiantly cursing the creature. Then, inexplicably, the dragon halted its attack. It turned and flew away, leaving Holless standing alone in the clearing, utterly bewildered by its sudden retreat. With a sigh, the warrior known as Deity of the Twilight plants his foot firmly on the ground. He reflects that his approach isn't some grand stratagem, but rather a cornerstone of conventional military tactics. His thoughts are violently interrupted by a massive explosion that hurls him backward through the air. He grimaces, realizing that taking out the fourth and fifth targets was the best he could manage under the circumstances. Before him, the source of the blast reveals itself. The massive, winged demonic beast, roaring in fury. It is not alone. A smaller, winged demon hovers nearby, ready to attack. Despite the danger, a confident smirk crosses the warrior's face. He glances at his armored gauntlet as it begins to glow with power, noting that while the device is incomplete, this situation is perfect for a test run. He faces the beast, sword at the ready. The creature's strength, he decides, is irrelevant. He has a mechanical god to test, a device codenamed XX Machina. According to his scenario, his victory is already assured. As Holless faces a massive, skeletal golem, his small, winged familiar hovers nearby, explaining that it has incorporated a bonus enhancement. The familiar cautions him against over-relying on the golem's performance, which is being pushed to its limits, as well as the power of his cure, orb, and enchantment. His attention shifts to a different adversary, a large, winged dragon that lunges forward with a ferocious snarl. In a blur of motion, Holless intercepts a smaller, moth-like creature, batting it aside with a swift punch before launching himself into the air to meet it again. He hovers before the larger dragon, observing that its magic has stabilized, allowing it to use nearly its full power. He concedes that while it is close, it is not quite at its absolute peak. Deciding that prolonging the fight is pointless, he clenches his armored fist. Energy crackles around his gauntlet as he prepares to end the confrontation from midair. The dragon retaliates, unleashing a powerful blast from its maw. Holless watches the attack, thinking that if not for the difference in their class, it would have been a good fight. He recognizes this display as the limit of the dragon's power. With a look of intense focus, he surges forward, channeling his energy and calling out the name of his technique. Taurus 3. His armored fist connects with devastating force, a streak of power that slices cleanly through the dragon's neck, severing its head in an instant. The massive, headless body of the beast crashes to the ground with a heavy thud. Amidst the rising dust, Holless lands softly. He walks through the aftermath, surveying the ground and noting that no gold coins or ingots have appeared. As he contemplates this, a pair of impeccably polished shoes steps into his view. In a desolate, rocky arena, Holless looks up with an air of weary boredom. He identifies the situation as the final round, just as a massive stone structure before him begins to rumble and open. From within the darkness, a monstrous, winged reptile with a horned head and sharp teeth shrieks as it is unleashed from its confines. It is followed by a torrent of similar creatures, their cries echoing as they pour into the sky. As the ground continues to tremble, he glances over his shoulder, completely unfazed by the growing threat. The sky quickly fills with a massive swarm of the dragon-like beasts, circling menacingly overhead. He lets out a sigh, looking up at the horde and noting with resignation that his opponent is finally getting serious. Shielding his eyes, he observes the sky, now blotted out by the enemy. He reflects that pitting a superior number of dragons against a single human is a rather conventional tactic. With a confident expression, he accepts the challenge, declaring that he will welcome their assault as he raises his hand and snaps his fingers. The ground behind him immediately begins to crack and shudder, as a massive form stirs beneath the surface. A colossal golem, constructed of immense stone blocks, heaves itself from the earth, its sheer scale dwarfing Holless as it rises to meet the aerial threat. The colossal stone hand hovers over its master. With a determined look, Holless gives the command to begin. He stands ready, sword in hand, before the towering construct he names Orchestrian, the barrage Iron Man. In response, Orchestrian's fingertips slide open, unleashing a relentless volley of projectiles that tear through the swarm of dragons. The barrage continues, striking even the larger demonic dragon, which bellows in fury against the assault. Holless observes the battle, noting that Orchestrian's cannonade is a magic bullet that needs no consideration for equipment or recoil. It can even execute precise firing patterns. But as he watches, a detail catches him off guard. He realizes that despite being defeated, the dragons are not dropping any ingots or currency as they fall from the sky. Reacting quickly, he shouts a new command to his golem. Orchestrian. Change settings to paralysis. The golem's next shot strikes a dragon, which convulses as paralysis takes hold, sending it plummeting from the sky. As more paralyzed dragons fall, Holless understands the situation. These summon monsters are entirely dependent on their summoner. If the summoner is defeated first, the monsters yield nothing. He resolves to accept this for the time being. His attention is drawn back to the massive demonic dragon, which roars with contempt, declaring that such an attack is useless against it. As the great beast stood defiant, its summoner's strategy became clear to Holless. The mass summoning of lesser dragons was a massive drain on resources, requiring real-time control over each individual creature. He then noticed that no new dragons were appearing. He wondered aloud if the swarm had finally been depleted. The lead dragon seemed to answer his thoughts, confirming that its master had ceased the pointless mass production tactic to focus resources on its main body. It acknowledged that Orchestrian was an unexpected variable, but one its master had surely prepared for. The creature let out a guttural roar, its maw stretched wide in a display of pure aggression. Unfazed, Holless raised his arm and shouted that the beast's efforts were futile. He addressed the dragon directly, stating that he held no personal grudge against it. It was simply a necessary sacrifice, a stepping stone required for him to achieve his own objective. With his purpose declared, he met the creature's charge head-on, his gaze fixed and determined. He unleashed a powerful strike, a technique named Scorpion 3, driving his armored fist directly into the dragon's chest. The massive creature was thrown back by the force of the blow, its body crashing lifelessly onto the distant plains. From afar, an unseen observer expressed their disbelief, stunned that someone had actually managed to defeat a dragon. Watching from a high vantage point, the warrior deity of the twilight could hardly believe his eyes. He acknowledged that the iron doll and its master were truly formidable, capable of manifesting such immense power from magical energy alone. He watched the aftermath, a small, crystalline object held to his brow as dust and motes of energy settled around him. A thought crystallized in his mind. So that was the one known as the hero's master. In the royal hall, chaos erupts. A towering armored giant stands impassively as Duke Lectinitus shouts in disbelief. He protests that the hero once called the strongest is being purged, and that his own family's greatest military power is being subjugated. Nearby, Tiamat noble Zate slams his fist on a table, while Luster lies defeated on the floor, grimacing that she cannot accept this outcome. From his throne, the fur-collared king gazes down upon the scene, his expression hidden by dark glasses. He addresses the assembly as criminals, coolly asking if the vast difference in their stations has robbed them of the will to even argue back. He continues, reminding the nobles before him that the commoner they so disdained was the one who defeated a dragon. The king states that the 10,000 gold coins earned from that battle were meant for reconstruction, and it is only natural that they must now leave everything behind. His words incite outrage. Tiamat noble Zate protests that such a large sum is impossible to gather and questions how they are meant to procure it. From the floor, Luster reflects grimly that while there were no fatalities this time, the worst option has been eliminated from their choices. Watching the proceedings, Earl Godal's expression is cold and severe. He internally agrees with the king's judgment, concluding that the crime of unleashing monsters upon the capital is grave, and therefore, the punishment is fitting. As a foot steps forward, an official announcement rings out. A forced dungeon run has been confirmed. Tiamat noble Zate cries out in shock. The king, a slight smirk playing on his lips, offers to explain what a forced dungeon is. Panic spreads as another noble tries to flee, shouting that it's a trap, only to be restrained by a guard. The fundamental nature of dungeons is laid bare. While some monsters exist as part of the natural world, those inside dungeons are mere constructs. When defeated, they typically yield coins and drop items. Within the dungeon's confines, strange, screeching creatures serve as its guardians. Immediately, the nobles turn on each other. Tiamat noble Zate insists the others go first, but Duke Lectinitus points a finger back, accusing him. Another noble joins the fray, denying any responsibility. A scuffle breaks out as the king's voice commands them to move as instructed. A crucial rule of these dungeons is revealed. Any items or treasures gained from defeating monsters will vanish on the spot. The only way to keep them is to carry them out through the dungeon's exit portal. A nearby guard observes the noble's panicked state, remarking on their apparent energy. Holding his goblet, the king concludes his briefing. He explains that if they use the dropped items, they will be unable to escape or stage a counterattack. With that, his explanation ends. He looks down at the terrified nobles and asks if they are enjoying the predicament he has orchestrated for them. Before him, one of the condemned nobles began to speak, his tone defiant. He claimed their actions were not treason, but an attempt to guide the king back to the path of a wise ruler, to show him the way of true justice. The king repeated the phrase, a wise ruler, with a broad, unsettling smile. The noble affirmed it, declaring that nobles are a chosen people, and as such, are beings entitled to a life of eternal luxury. He grew more fervent, his voice rising as he proclaimed that their lineage, chosen since ancient times and descended from gods, made them the legitimate rulers. He argued that, just as labor requires compensation, their unique burden of governance demanded an equally unique and special reward. Therefore, he concluded, their enjoyment of this eternal luxury was nothing less than justice itself. The king demonstrating this privilege, he insisted, was the very proof of his wisdom. The monarch listened, his expression unreadable, while another king observed the exchange in silence. His hand tightened at his chin, a flicker of disgust crossing his features. He thought to himself how shameful it was. These were the nobles of the Tiamat kingdom, yet after being granted authority, they had unleashed monsters upon the capital. He finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "Have you forgotten?" he asked, prompting a confused "what?" from the nobles. Another noble surged forward, his face contorted with indignation. He bellowed that those who inherit chosen blood and wield great power should not be punished. It was precisely to demonstrate this power, he confessed, that they had released the monsters upon the capital. A sudden, chilling understanding dawned on the king, his eye widening in shock. He finally grasped their twisted logic. To them, the measure of one's power was demonstrated by the number of the dead. He turned his gaze upon the assembly of nobles, his voice ringing with cold clarity. He conceded their point. If the nation is prosperous, it is natural for wealth to gather around the king. And, he agreed, It is only right to pay a high reward to those entrusted with governance. That's right, the nobles cried out in triumph. But the king continued, his words taking a grim turn. He reminded them that throughout history, humanity has repeated wars and massacres. It is a fact, he stated, that the title of hero has often been bestowed upon those who have killed the most. He looks down upon the nobles, his expression somber. After a moment of silence, he states that while he understands their reasoning, he must tell them plainly, they are fools. His words strike the nobles, who react with disbelief. The king continues, his voice rising, declaring that before they are nobles, they have forgotten the founding principle of the World Conference. Their confusion is palpable. In response, the king's voice booms through the throne room as he proclaims the sacred oath. Even if we do not pray to the gods, we will protect our people. He elaborates on the two great principles of this oath. To protect the people is not merely to defend them from monster attacks, but also from sickness, famine, and the strife of war between fellow humans. His voice grows cold as he defines this protection, to ensure every person lives out their natural lifespan. He accuses the nobles directly, stating they have shamelessly exploited the lives of their own people simply to demonstrate their own power. Looking out over the entire court, he reveals the second great principle. The concept of God is a self-imposed limit on humanity's potential. To claim godhood is to cease growing as a person. The nobles are thrown to the floor. One of them, Zate, protests frantically, reminding the king that he himself once said a king is equal to a god. The king retorts that he never meant it in such a way, and that by their actions, they have blasphemed the ancestor of the World Conference. With the judgment rendered, a knight captain steps forward. He commands the guards to take the condemned to the punishment dungeon, where they will face their execution, the Blade Demon Night March. As the guards drag the screaming and pleading nobles away, the king watches them go. He reflects grimly that if circumstances had been different, he might have become like them. Now, all he can do is carve this lesson into his heart. Elsewhere, in a dungeon, Holless informs his companions that they can borrow the boss room for training since it's spacious and will be repaired soon. He tells the animal-eared girl to bring their things, noting that their master is growing impatient. Deity agrees, ready to begin. He found himself in the midst of intense training. The long-haired warrior, Luster, descended upon him with her blade, which he parried with his armored gauntlet as the maid Tyeris watched from a distance. His gauntlet sparked as he deflected another swift strike, the force of the impact echoing in the training hall. She pressed her advantage, demanding to know if he intended to do nothing but defend. Her sudden aggression seemed to catch him off guard. In response, he pivoted sharply, driving his armored fist into her stomach with a heavy thud. The force of the blow sent her stumbling back, her dagger falling from her grasp. As she knelt on the stone floor, her concern shifted as she asked about Tyeris. At that moment, a second dagger hurtled through the air directly at the maid. Tyeris cried out, but the weapon dissolved into a puff of smoke just inches from her face. The projectile had been an illusion, dispelled by Holless's quick intervention. He lowered his hand as the last wisps of the phantom dagger faded away. His attention returned to his opponent on the floor. He took a deliberate step forward, his armored boot planting firmly on the stone beside her. Luster looked up at him, a wry expression on her face. She commented that he had become too accustomed to her tactics, but conceded that he was indeed showing growth. As she got to her feet, rubbing her head with a groan, a flustered Tyeris, now glowing with a faint magical energy, asked why she had been targeted. Holless simply watched the two of them, the spar concluded. He watches as Tyeris collapses to the floor, breathing heavily from the exertion. He realizes that pushing her further is still too much for her at this stage. After a moment's rest, he sits down and addresses both Luster and Tyeris, clarifying that he hasn't truly defeated Luster yet. He reminds them that he was the one who drilled combat techniques into the 6 executives. Luster bristles at his calm demeanor, remarking that she can't stand losing to someone 10 years her junior. At 27, Holless is significantly older than the 17-year-old Luster and 16-year-old Tyeris. She reflects on their past battles, recalling how they spent 2 months focused entirely on conquering the Sky Gigant. It was because of this intense focus, she admits, that she completely failed to notice the overwhelming power of his weaponry. In response, Holless smirks, effortlessly forming a small, glowing cube in his gauntlet hand. He calls it his masterpiece, noting that it's only at 8% completion. Once finished, he boasts, it'll be more than 10 times as powerful. Luster stares, utterly astonished. Changing the subject, he calls out to Luster. She and Tyeris turn towards him, Luster still processing his words, wondering what he could possibly be planning with such power. Before he can continue, 2 women arrive. A cheerful woman with goggles named Rammel announces her return, while her companion, a calm woman with glasses named Ellie, offers a simple greeting. Rammel approaches, noting that it's been a while since they've all been able to meet. She turns to Tyeris, observing that she must have a lot to do, and asks if there's anything to eat, causing the maid to become flustered. Seeing this, Holless steps in, offering to provide snacks himself. Tyeris looks at him in surprise. With a wave of his hand and a swirl of energy, a small table materializes out of thin air. He then produces a large plate piled high with biscuits. Rammel gasps in delight. Holless explains that he made them beforehand and stored them in an item box, and that he even has tea ready. He explains his technique to a curious Rammel, revealing that his storage golem and sweets maker golem are linked, allowing them to intrude upon a subspace to produce the treats. Ellie asks if he's demonstrating this now. As she nibbles on a snack, Ramel remarks that it makes sense. She had been busy making weapons in various regions. In areas where the Demon King's strategy was weak or combatants were few, they couldn't secure enough weapons, so they had to focus on improving quality instead. Following that thought, Ellie adds that she was consolidating loans. She explains that in regions where the damage was particularly severe, she procured magic tools from other places and provided substantial financial aid. She clarifies to Luster that there was no point in offering aid to regions with little damage. It wasn't a charity, and many countries were unable to prepare what was needed on their own. Taking a sip from his cup, Holless observes that there has been a lot of movement among people recently. He mentions seeing a large number of carriages on his way, suggesting that many adventurers are relocated. His observation proves true elsewhere, as a group of adventurers notes that their current location is easy to operate in since it's already been investigated. They discuss how, among the nations at the World Conference, only the Dragonstone country and the Tiamat Kingdom are not involved with the loans, which is problematic as both territories have numerous dungeons. Back at their meeting, Ellie explains the wider implications. The Adventurers Association maintains neutrality towards the nations, but they're still affected by national affairs. If countries that took out loans decide to collect money from them, the restrictions on adventurers will become much stricter. Luster voices her concern, asking if the increase in adventurers will make training in dungeons more difficult. Holless wonders if things will be all right, but Ellie, covering her mouth thoughtfully, suggests this is a point of concern for them. She then turns to Holless, explaining that they are here to observe the adventurers who are getting carried away. She pointedly asks him why he has returned, reminding him that adventurers were originally a community of commoners who banded together to defeat the Demon King. Holless scratches his head, flustered by her directness. Ramel interjects, explaining to Luster that this country has almost no entry regulations. In exchange for the Dragonstone country having priority in operating the dungeons and purchasing the mind or in jewels, adventurers have access to a system where they can easily purchase excellent weapons. She let out a long sigh, remarking that the Dragonstone country's operations were certainly convenient for adventurers, but that there was one more thing to consider. As they spoke, Ellie reported to Holless that there were rumors of headquarters staff being on the move. She added, with some hesitation, that this was likely a joke, but the term court adventurers had also come up. He questioned if she was referring to the Divine Prophecy pilgrimage. Ellie confirmed that she was, explaining that for adventurers, it was the most malevolent form of invasion strategy. She reminded him that a nation had actually been destroyed by this very tactic 10 years prior. His expression hardened as he processed the grave implications, asking aloud if the Adventurers Association headquarters intended to destroy their country. He quickly decided that he didn't need the finer details. Vigilance was all that was required. Tyrus quietly agreed. The weight of the news settled on him, and he ran a hand through his hair in frustration. He lamented how everything had become so complicated all at once, trailing off as he considered his own role in it. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm, stating his belief that being an adventurer should be about cherishing the daily grind. He felt it was something more noble, and that was all he had ever focused on. Hearing this, Lungia pressed him for their next move, asking what he intended to do. With cold determination, he looked at her and stated his plan to round them all up. While Ramel met his declaration with an enthusiastic, "All right," Ellie adjusted her glasses, offering a more cautious perspective. She advised that to truly understand the root of the problem, careful observation was necessary. The group fell into a tense silence around the table. Holless leaned back, hands clasped behind his head, grimacing at the direness of the situation. Lungia watched him, wondering what he was truly thinking. As he wrestled with the present crisis, a memory from his past surfaced. A young man, kneeling before him, reached out a hand and pleaded, begging Holless to teach him how to use a sword. Outside a large building, a woman's determined footstep halts as she calls out a name, having heard about a recent incident involving Holless. Inside, Luster confronts Holless at his workbench, accusing his iron doll of rampaging through the capital. He calmly refutes her claim, stating that it wasn't his creation, but a dragon, that caused the trouble in the capital, and asks if she isn't mixing up the events. Nearby, Queen Lucia listens, quietly affirming to herself that the golem was indeed activated outside the capital. She muses with a slight smile that if he had actually done it, he would be a truly great villain. Luster then points out with a sly grin that even if he didn't cause destruction, he could still be punished. Annoyed, Holless questions what she takes him for, insisting he's done nothing to warrant it. Queen Lucia, laughing, declares him a bad person anyway and announces her presence. The animal-eared girl's attention shifts to the cluttered workbench, asking what he is working on. Holless explains that the components are for the core of a magic tool, and that he is in the process of building a weapon. She wonders aloud if it's some kind of gun or mechanical cannon. Holless clarifies that it's a device capable of piercing an iron golem's armor with a flash of light, an explanation that leaves Queen Lucia wide-eyed with astonishment. His companion asks how he acquired such incredible technology. He replies that it's a long story, but he learned it from a book. She immediately retorts that his answer was far too short. Luster speculates that his ideas must stem from the Great Summoning Era, 1800 years prior. Queen Lucia agrees, noting that while documents from that time would allow one to do anything, reproducing its highly refined culture is another challenge entirely. Her eyes then fall upon a small, intricate mechanical model. With a look of pure delight, she picks it up, exclaiming that it looks like fun. She presents the model to the others. Holless confirms that it is a replica of the iron doll that was active outside the capital, prompting the animal-eared girl to ask if this is really it. He warns Luster to stop, cautioning her to be careful as the weapon is actually loaded with a bullet. Queen Lucia yelps in alarm while Luster laughs boisterously, fiddling with the miniature weapon. As she continues to handle the model, Holless explains that despite its size, it's powerful enough to easily defeat a B-rank adventurer. Luster, rattling a nearby doorframe in frustration, shouts at him not to point it in her direction, admitting it's scary. Queen Lucia, however, gazes at the small automaton with a different perspective, murmuring how cute and well-built it is. Luster laughs heartily, stating that she won't be deceived by its appearance. Holless, meanwhile, considers the possibility that the automaton might move on its own, though he isn't certain. Suddenly, the miniature golem lurches forward, its foot landing with a solid thud. Queen Lucia's eyes sparkle with delight as she exclaims that it's walking. He explains that its slow pace is intentional. It was designed as a fixed-gun battery, not for high-speed movement. He adds that it lacks the mobility required for the kind of body-mounted armament he is used to operating. Luster nods, understanding the design's purpose. Queen Lucia, now holding the small golem, asks if she can keep it. Holless agrees, explaining that he no longer uses it. It served its purpose during the early verification stages of golem development, and the actual, full-size version is now stored deep inside the Kinsekai fortress. Luster confirms if he's truly done with it. He then asks what its name is. Luster looks on, intrigued, as Holless reveals its designation, Orchestrian. The barrage Iron Man Queen Lucia beams, affectionately shortening the name to Orchestran. Her work for the day is completely forgotten as she fawns over her new companion. Outside, the grand structure of their destination looms. Looking at the building, she considers the logistical problem ahead. If a large number of adventurers gather here, there will surely be a shortage of accommodations. Her hands slam down on the desk in frustration. She exclaims that it's impossible to prepare so much on such short notice. Nearby, a girl with animal ears sits amidst a mountain of paperwork. She remarks that Holless decorated the miniature golem, Orchestrian, so nicely, only for it to be buried under construction applications, a fate she finds pitiful. As she continues writing, she wishes aloud that the golem had an auto-scribing feature. She explains she can't stop, as merchants from Ellie's community are on their way. Queen Lucia, looking exhausted, asks if Aderica has come to play, but the girl corrects her, stating that people seeking an audience are arriving. Just then, a knock echoes through the room. A woman with long, dark hair and glasses enters, offering a polite greeting to Queen Lucia. The queen's weary expression vanishes, replaced by pure delight as she cries out Ellie's name. She rushes forward, enveloping Ellie in a powerful, heartfelt hug. Held in the embrace, Ellie responds with a playful, affectionate expression. She teases the queen, remarking that she's as strange as ever. The animal-eared girl watches with growing impatience. Ellie continues her jest, lamenting that once Lucia turns 16, she'll no longer be able to feel a thrill around her. Her patience exhausted, the girl declares that bringing the golem was the correct decision. Pointing an accusatory finger, she brands Ellie a lolicon and commands Orchestrian to attack. In response, Ellie's demeanor shifts instantly. With a hardened gaze, she catches the golem's fist mid-lunge, effortlessly halting its assault. The sudden movement leaves Queen Lucia sprawled on the floor. Her attention returns to the queen on the floor. She asks what the matter was that required her presence. Composing herself, Queen Lucia explains that she has been struggling with construction-related problems and has prepared an item specifically to solve them, gesturing towards a document. She examined the documents Queen Lucia presented. They detailed a large-scale magic tool, one capable of constructing a high-quality, 3-story building in just half a day. The queen's attendant suddenly erupted, accusing them of trying to fool the queen. She insisted that this tool was merely something her master had built for amusement and was not what was currently needed. As Queen Lucia tried to reason with her attendant, pointing out that it was still a magic tool, Ellie calmly interjected with a question. She asked if the attendant's master, Holless, was not, in fact, a golem master. She then clarified the distinction for the perplexed queen. While golems and magic tools are similar, a magic tool's performance remains constant regardless of the user. A golem's capabilities, however, are directly influenced by the skill of its handler. A look of understanding dawned on Queen Lucia's face. Ellie confirmed her realization. The plan was to extract the most important performance-related components from the magic tool and integrate them into a golem. This new creation could then be operated by the skilled golem master, Holless. The queen considered the logistics, noting that while anyone could operate the device by inserting coins, a large-scale tool would require a vast quantity. Ellie smiled, assuring her that, of course, she had already prepared a certain amount of funding. She then casually proposed a figure, 10,000 gold coins. The queen and her attendant stared in disbelief. Lucia stammered that such a sum was equivalent to 1/10 of the entire national budget, questioning how Ellie could offer it so nonchalantly. Ellie maintained her composure, stating that it was only natural to provide such assistance, as they were all citizens of the same nation. The attendant, however, retorted that she hadn't missed Ellie's earlier mention of the funds being a loan and declared that they would accept it without reservation. With the matter of funding settled, Ellie placed a briefcase on the desk. She explained that the magic tool inside was also part of the test. Its safety was assured, but its true practicality could only be judged by using it in the field. Queen Lucia agreed, deciding to consult with the castle's architect. The queen expressed surprise that the meeting was already over. Ellie confirmed that since she had delivered the necessary components, her part was done, and asked if she was now free to leave. She looks on with a knowing smile, remarking that it is still too early for Queen Lucia to handle such components. As the door closes, a voice from within questions how long the wait will be, demanding to know if the situation is truly understood. Meanwhile, Queen Lucia sits with a weary expression as Aderica cheerfully asks if the project will begin tomorrow or the day after. The queen mutters that she will never understand such a strange hobby and that it's fine to be ignorant of it. Far from the royal court, Holless and Rammel walk through the bustling streets of a city district lined with shops. Their walk leads them to a specific area which Holless identifies as the smithing district of the Dragonstone country. He notes with surprise that the state provides subsidies for the shops located there. Rammel adds that the smiths are encouraged to create the finest goods possible without worrying about living expenses. Holless observes the high-quality wares in a window, concluding that the state is investing heavily in the craft. She turns to him, asking if even a novice could craft items of such quality. He clarifies that while he is no appraiser, he does possess some skill in metalwork. Inside a shop, Holless explains to a blacksmith that his own sword-type, golem, uses special metals that ordinary smiths can't handle. Rammel listens, realizing her master only taught her the basics of weapon crafting before shouting at the smith, demanding to know why an item isn't for sale. Her outburst draws the attention of other patrons. Holless ignores them, holding up a small, ornate dagger that emits a faint glow. He states plainly that it is made from a special kind of metal. He then confronts the blacksmith, explaining that improper magical control of the dagger would tear the user apart from the inside. He demands to know why the smith would sell such a dangerous item without requiring a certificate of magical operation proficiency, leaving the man speechless. He is interrupted by another man, a B-rank adventurer, who confidently states he can handle the weapon's magic. Holless, unfazed, challenges the newcomer to state the kingdom's regulations, certain he will understand once he does. The adventurer scoffs at the blacksmith, claiming that this town's advanced processing techniques make such precautions unnecessary. Rammel observes that since the Adventurers Guild doesn't issue the required certificates, it must be a unique feature of this town, implying the man is ignorant of the wider rules. Enraged by the implication, the adventurer turns on Holless, shouting that an amateur like him wouldn't understand and that the weapon is a pitiful thing. He then yells at the blacksmith, calling him an old man and telling him not to be ridiculous. Before the argument can escalate further, Rammel steps forward, her expression hardening as she draws back her fist. Her fist connects squarely with the adventurer's jaw, the impact echoing through the workshop. The force of the blow sends the man flying across the room, crying out in pain as he crashes to the floor. Rammel offers a simple, almost casual apology. Holless turns to her, calmly advising that in such situations, it's better to restrain someone from above rather than simply resorting to a punch. Rammel listens, a bead of sweat on her cheek, looking slightly chastised. The adventurer stumbles to his feet, clutching his bruised jaw. He demands to know what just happened and tells Rammel that if she apologizes, he'll forgive her. She stands with her hands on her hips, unimpressed by his offer. His pain is suddenly forgotten. A wide, excited grin spreads across his face as he declares her an incredible find, a true gem. He eagerly invites her to join his guild, much to her confusion. He presses on, asking if she felt the pressure he was exuding earlier. He incorrectly assumes she must be a blacksmith, impressed by how well she uses her strength, and admits he's still not sure what just happened, as it was also sudden. As the commotion unfolded, Holless considered the man's claim. A B-rank adventurer, he recalled the Adventurers Association's ranking system, a simple ladder from F-rank novice to S-rank elite. The ranks of SS and Hero were considered special classifications, entirely separate. Rammel seemed just as unimpressed by the title. The adventurer, however, was undeterred by their skepticism. He insisted he would handle everything, telling Rammel not to worry about the guild. He then foolishly dismissed his own B rank as nothing special, which only served to enrage Rammel further. With a furious cry, she struck him again, her fist connecting squarely with his jaw. The blow sent him stumbling back, but Rammel wasn't finished. She seized him by the collar of his armor, declaring his actions justified her response as self-defense. With a powerful twist, she prepared to eject him from the premises. She hurled him out of the shop's entrance. He landed hard on the street outside, face first, sending up a cloud of dust and startling the other patrons. With the interruption finally handled, Rammel complained about how tiresome it was to be underestimated, especially after fighting monsters that mimicked humans. Holless, however, was focused on something else entirely. He asked about her sword, noting the fine quality of its material extraction. Rammel seemed surprised by his question, wondering why her supposedly cute apprentice was so fixated on such things. Before Holless could respond, the blacksmith cut in. He told Holless he was getting distracted and should focus on something else, adding that Rammel would surely lose anyway. Rammel reluctantly conceded the point. The blacksmith's dismissive tone vanished in an instant. His eyes widened as he stared at a document on his clipboard, a look of utter shock on his face. He muttered Rammel's name, then exclaimed, "The hero's community's greatest blacksmith?" As he reeled from the revelation, Holless continued to inspect the swords on display, while Rammel tried to get his attention. She gave a confident smile and tipped her goggles. "Yep, I'm Ramel. Nice to meet you," she announced. In the background, the blacksmith was completely flabbergasted. The pieces clicked into place for Holless. He turned to her, the tension high as he asked, "So that means you're the hero's blacksmith?" Rammel's grin widened. "That's right," she confirmed. Seen through the shop's window, the blacksmith clutched his head, groaning in disbelief. But his despair quickly transformed into pure elation. He threw his arms up and flexed his powerful muscles, letting out a triumphant roar. While the blacksmith reeled from the revelation, Holless turned to Rammel. He mused that he'd heard tales of her exploits, negotiating with dragons in the capital, influencing tax reductions, and maintaining national facilities, but found his current situation far more interesting. He decided he would buy something from the shop for study. He pointed to 2 swords on display and declared to the shopkeeper that he would purchase them. Overcome with emotion, the blacksmith covered his face, exclaiming that the hero's master was in his shop, a fact he could boast about for the rest of his life. Holless, looking unimpressed by the outburst, simply told him to process the payment. With the transaction complete, he stepped out of the smithy, apologizing for equipping his new blades on the spot. He examined one of the swords, noting its quality was better than he had expected. Rammel explained that while government-affiliated magic tool development was progressing, there were few private shops like this one to browse. As they walked away, Holless reflected that his first impression of the blacksmith was of someone who couldn't properly judge character. He then realized the B-rank adventurer from before was gone, concluding that the blacksmith must have dealt with him. Rammel confirmed his assessment. He asked Rammel if that man was the type of arrogant adventurer Ellie had warned them about, wondering aloud if such people were common. She confirmed that while they aren't the majority, their numbers are growing, particularly in this region. She explained that due to a shortage of lodging, they have been lending construction-grade magic tools to the Dragonstone country, which has inadvertently increased the likelihood of encountering such individuals. Elsewhere, the spiky-haired adventurer from the blacksmith shop was complaining. He recounted what his guild mates had said, admitting that being alone might have made him act more boldly than he should have. Back in their own quarters, Holless and Rammel listened to a report, with Holless asking if that was the typical explanation, which Rammel affirmed. The adventurer continued his plea inside a large, stately building, insisting he was merely trying to procure weapons. He raised his voice, shouting an official he called Avon. He found it utterly preposterous that the shopkeeper had refused to sell weapons to him. He continues his tirade inside an office, where the official, Avon, sits slumped in a chair, pinching the bridge of his nose in exhaustion. The adventurer insists that he was properly negotiating with the shopkeeper, but complains that another customer interfered with his business. As he speaks, a woman with long, light-colored hair listens impassively. Avon considers the man's words, his expression hardening. He recognizes the adventurer's affiliation with the SS-rank guild, Censored. The official realizes the gravity of the situation. Refusing to sell weapons to this guild is effectively the same as refusing to sell to all adventurers. From within a large, stately building, a voice shouts in affirmation. That's right. Inside, a spiky-haired adventurer slams his fist on a desk, declaring furiously to a calm official that he's picking a fight with the shopkeeper. He vows that he won't forgive that violent woman. The official, Avon, asks what's wrong. The adventurer complains that he went to the trouble of inviting her to his guild, only for her to make a fool of him. As he fumes, a goggled woman named Rammel appears behind him, playfully poking his temple. He whirls around, stunned to see her. He shouts in disbelief, questioning why she is there when he was just about to start a fight with her. Avon calmly advises him not to pick the wrong fight. He reveals that he's been gathering information on her for some time, noting that she's a blacksmith and that the adventurer himself hadn't denied it, leaving the man flustered. The adventurer bursts into laughter, dismissing the concern. He boasts that she's just a redhead with a ponytail who got lucky, and that he was merely caught off guard. From the side, a woman with glasses named Ellie watches the exchange with a subtle smile. His laughter is cut short as Avon speaks again, his tone serious. He reiterates that she is a blacksmith capable of defeating a B-rank model, emphasizing that this is the crucial fact. The adventurer's bravado vanishes, replaced by dawning shock. He realizes he truly did pick the wrong fight because that woman is the workshop chief of the hero's community, as Rammel herself declares with a confident grin. The adventurer can only stare, utterly dumbfounded. He clutches his head in frustration, demanding to know why they would refuse an invitation to his SS-rank guild, especially after he submitted the report on defeating the Demon King. Avon coolly retorts, asking what makes him think they are superior. The spiky-haired adventurer recounts a past failure, explaining to Avon that their hero was defeated because the Demon Lord possessed a skill that controlled men. He insists that with an item to protect their minds, they would have easily triumphed. Avon, who had been sitting silently, finally speaks. He addresses the adventurer as Settle and asks a pointed question. How does Settle, a guild master, know that he was incorporated into Avon's personal retinue? Settle smirks, initially claiming it's because he is an excellent warrior, but then his expression falters slightly. He gives the true, one-word answer: money. Even elaborates, stating that Settle's family paid him a substantial sum. He adds that normally, only those ranked A or higher are permitted to join his retinue, leaving Settle utterly stunned. As he processes this, the long-haired woman beside Avon interjects sharply. She informs Settle that everyone else in the retinue is S rank. She then gestures toward his sword, revealing it to be a failed creation by that woman from the community, which he bought at a loss. She continues her explanation, revealing that the rules were bent to allow him entry precisely because the money from his family was needed to win that very sword in auction. The full weight of the truth crashes down on Settle, and he collapses to his knees. He can't believe that a supposed failure could be so valuable. He realizes with horror that it was this very sword that allowed him to be promoted from S rank to the illustrious SS rank. Avon looms over him, grabbing his chin. He coldly asks if Settle understands the difference in their stations now. He states that while he doesn't care if Settle is a fool, he should be prepared for expulsion and exile if he causes any trouble. Humiliated, Settle scrambles away, muttering curses under his breath. Avon watches him retreat, then calmly suggests to his companion that they should all cool their heads for a while. Once he is gone, the woman, Leona, asks Avon how many of another guild's members are in town with Settle. Avon confirms there are about 50, a number he considers to be large. She listened as the guild master boasted about his connections with other high-ranking guilds, but Avon thought to himself that it was a shallow association at best. She countered that they couldn't make a rash move. Instead, she proposed using the hero community to eliminate them, reminding him of a past incident where troublesome nobles were arrested by heroes. This, she suggested, could be used to their advantage, as the rival guild was likely to cause trouble for the hero community. He understood the implication. Acknowledging that a single misstep could lead to their own guild's ruin, he instructed Leona to gather the executives and formulate a counterplan. She affirmed the order. His gaze drifted out the window, where he spotted a familiar figure in the street below, Deity. Avon reflected grimly that it had been 10 years since they were in the same town, and a pleasant reunion seemed impossible. Elsewhere, within the same town, an adventurer's guild hall was quiet. The quest board was filled with notices, most of them simple requests for or delivery. Before it stood two figures, Holless and Ellie. Holless remarked that he had been an adventurer 10 years ago, but had to quit because he couldn't hold that position while also working at the castle. Ellie asked if he had joined a different guild branch. As they stepped inside, the bell on the door chimed. Ellie, noticing Holless's distraction, asked if he was even listening to her. Their attention was immediately captured by a small girl dragging a large sack, cheerfully announcing her return. Holless wondered aloud who she was. Ellie explained that the girl, Nasha, was the youngest adventurer using this guild branch and was beloved by all as their mascot. The girl approached the reception desk, where the woman on duty looked on with a gentle smile. It was known that in the Kinkai Great Veins, there were specific collection points at lower altitudes where monsters didn't appear, allowing even a child to gather materials safely. The receptionist praised Nasha for collecting so much again. As the girl proudly asked for her haul to be checked, Ellie explained to Holless that to keep the energetic child occupied, they sent her on routes away from the general paths. He had followed Ellie's suggestion to visit the Adventurers Guild, though he hadn't thought much of it at the time. Upon entering, Ellie's demeanor shifted as she warmly greeted a young girl, Nasha. The child addressed Ellie as the hero's older sister, a title that prompted Holless to silently wonder if the girl was simply odd. Ellie, smiling, noted that Nasha had been working hard lately. Nasha explained with bright-eyed determination that her father had been badly injured, so she was doing her best to earn money in his stead. Ellie listened, touched by the girl's resolve, and called her admirable. A nearby guild receptionist gently cautioned Nasha not to overdo it, mentioning that she had been suffering from a heart condition until recently. Nasha cheerfully waved off the concern, declaring that she was all better now. The young girl then proclaimed her dream, to work hard and become a great adventurer, just like the heroine she idolized. At this heartfelt declaration, Ellie was overcome with emotion, clasping her hands and exclaiming how wonderful that was. Holless watched them, contemplating the concept of admiration. He mused that for an adventurer, it wasn't an ideal to be shouted aloud, but a quiet motivation to be held close while dedicating oneself to daily training. He continued his internal reflection, concluding that while ideals might be a part of life, true admiration is a force that never weakens or fades away. His thoughts were abruptly cut short when an agitated man stormed over, demanding to know what was happening. Holless had instinctively pulled Ellie aside, and the man furiously misinterpreted the gesture, accusing him of trying to force an eternal hug on her. Startled, Holless could only stammer that it was nothing. As Holless tried to regain his composure, Nasha stared at him with a look of dawning recognition, wondering where she had seen his face before. The girl's intense gaze triggered a memory. An image of a raging fire flashed in his mind, along with a distinct recollection of carrying a small child to safety. With a jolt, he realized Nasha was the child he had rescued that day. He knelt down, noting to Nasha that she seemed energetic, which was the most important thing. She smiled brightly, confirming that she was indeed feeling well. As they spoke, Ellie suddenly appeared between them, startling Nasha. With a grin, Ellie welcomed Holless, asking if he had also come to his senses. Nasha, caught off guard, wondered which side Ellie was even on. Before a response could be given, the heavy tread of armored boots echoed nearby. A group of adventurers strode past, their leader, Settle, complaining that his men were being too rowdy. He turned to one of his companions, a man with a mohawk, telling him that if he wanted to cause a scene, he should save it for the tavern. The man shot back, asking just how many people he intended to destroy. In a sharp, sudden movement, Settle slapped his companion's hand away. The group of adventurers then strode purposefully into the main hall, drawing the attention of everyone present. Their leader, Deity, threw his arms wide and boisterously announced that they were the S-rank guild, Excalibur. Standing below, Ellie calmly informed her companions that, from that moment on, the entire guild branch would be following her orders. Nasha, clutching her sword, looked up in confusion, asking about the term Rinko. Iderica, standing nearby, explained that it refers to when people from different guilds or communities gather to form a single team. The idea was new to Nasha. Holless turned to Ellie, questioning if such a takeover was even possible. She affirmed that it was, depending on the rank of the representatives' guild. Their hushed conversation caught Settle's attention, who turned and demanded to know who Holless was. He bellowed, demanding to know what they were whispering about. As he shouted, Ellie calmly considered her next move, wondering if the SS-rank guild Censored had enough members to proceed. He bellows that anyone who talks back will be blown away, declaring that's how it is. Nasha, startled but resolute, grips a wooden practice sword and tells him not to say such things, calling out his name in defiance. Her face flushes with determination as she declares that she, too, will become like the heroes one day. This outburst draws the attention of the other adventurers who wonder about the child's audacity. From among them, Deity's eye narrows, his focus sharpening on the scene. She turns to Holless and Ellie, proudly stating that she isn't just a kid, but an adventurer who will become a hero. This enrages Settle, who scoffs at her bold words. He sneers, his irritation growing. He complains that adventurers have been getting all the attention lately, being compared to heroes, and it's been grating on his nerves. Nasha flinches back from his menacing advance. He grabs the girl by the head, his face contorted in a cruel grin. He mocks her, saying a woman without special traits or strength is 100 years too early to be acting so cocky, threatening to kill her as she begins to cry. His companions erupt in laughter, finding the idea of such a kid becoming a hero ridiculous. As Nasha crouches on the floor in tears, Deity's calm voice cuts through the jeering, asking which of them is the pathetic one. A palpable, chilling aura suddenly emanates from Ellie. Her face is cast in shadow, her eyes wide with a terrifying intensity that silences the room and causes the mocking adventurers to recoil in fear. She turns her cold gaze to Deity, her voice low and commanding. She orders him to stop the employee's rebellious attitude, warning that if he doesn't, she will report him for being uncooperative. A dark, menacing energy swirls around her as Settle and his friends look on in shock. Before anyone can act on the command, a blonde female adventurer storms forward, striking Settle hard across the face. She furiously shouts at him for daring to make Nasha cry, calling him trash. She declares that as a receptionist, she has to deal with high-rank adventurers like him every day, and she's had enough. Her fury unabated. The blonde adventurer roared at the adventurers who had tormented the child, ordering them to get out and never return. The force of her previous blow sent Settle and his companions flying from the guild hall, as Holless watched the chaotic exit in stunned silence. In the aftermath, Deity knelt to comfort the crying Nasha, reassuring her that the scary man was gone and praising her courage. Nearby, the short-haired guild receptionist flexed her bicep, also telling the girl not to come back, while Ellie watched them. The receptionist then turned to Ellie, noting that while one scary person was gone, another remained. She then asked for a moment to speak with the trainer, Deity, prompting a curious glance from Ellie. A short time later, in a private room, the receptionist sat across from Deity. She asked if he was indeed the hero's master, commenting on how he remained surprisingly calm during the earlier commotion and acknowledging that his punch had been quite powerful. She then began to reminisce with Ellie, explaining that she herself had been an adventurer until a few years ago, partnered with a blacksmith. Thanks to him, she claimed, she was now able to handle quests far more effectively than she could have before. Her story continued, recalling how the blacksmith had a strange grin the previous night because someone had purchased an incredible sword, putting him in high spirits. Ellie asked if she was referring to the shop, Smith's House Angel, which made Deity realize she was talking about his master's renowned blacksmith, Angel. He excitedly explained that he was studying under Rammel and had, in fact, bought 2 swords from Angel, which had thrilled him. The receptionist smiled, realizing that the hero's master was the one who had purchased the swords, a fact he could certainly be proud of. Their cheerful discussion was cut short as Ellie interjected, her expression serious. She asked to interrupt, wanting to know what their business was. She addressed the receptionist directly, asking how the Guild Association headquarters intended to handle the incident with the Settle Federation. She stated that they would have to await that judgment, which seemed to catch the receptionist off guard. The receptionist calmly replied that she would speak to the branch manager herself, declaring that this was now her business as well. Ellie's eyes narrowed slightly as she asked if she was referring to that matter. She continued the conversation, explaining that rumors from the Tyrant Kingdom had reached them. It seemed there was talk of establishing a framework for court adventurers. As Deity and Ellie listened, The receptionist elaborated on the concept. The state would grant official titles to adventurers whose skills and conduct were deemed exemplary, setting them as a standard for others within the kingdom. He processed this information with a thoughtful frown. In exchange for limiting their activities to the kingdom, these adventurers would be granted special privileges. The receptionist provided context, describing the three foundational pillars of their world: the religious state, maintaining life in the name of a god; the blood-united state, which chose to prosper as a human lineage; and the adventurers, who journeyed to escape the endless strife between the other two. She explained that human society was maintained by the delicate balance between the divine and the bloodlines. To mix these fundamentally different ways of life and organization would be to invite chaos, upsetting the very foundation of their world. Bringing the conversation back to the present, Ellie acknowledged that while she might not fully agree, she understood the plan was to entrust the Settle Federation matter to them. The receptionist then asked if they could handle controlling the animosity from the hero community. Ellie confirmed without hesitation that it would be no problem. With that settled, she shifted her focus. Everything else was fine, she stated, but she had one particular concern: Nasha. She asked the receptionist to please keep an eye on the girl for a little while longer. The receptionist's expression grew serious. She warned that something might happen to the child because of this incident and urged Ellie to be careful. Ellie agreed, vowing to watch over Nasha around the clock. Deity looked on, surprised by her intense resolve. Their meeting concluded, and the receptionist waved them off with a cheerful wink. As they left, she called out a final request: to tell Angel the blacksmith to lend her a hand with a strange or he possessed. Outside, the quiet street stretched before them, lined with the sturdy buildings of the town. Under the cover of night, outside a grand, multi-story building, the adventurer Settle reviews a document with a satisfied smirk, murmuring his approval. Inside, a well-dressed man named Alvaro explains his concerns to Settle. He posits that if the current union continues to grow in scale, it will inevitably become an organization that monopolizes all the profits of the capital, Lapis. Settle confirms Alvaro's assessment. As Alvaro pauses, filled with uncertainty, Settle sits comfortably at a table with a glass of wine, chuckling to himself as he continues to examine the papers before him. The man, sweating nervously, calls out to him. Settle glances over with a sharp, condescending glare, dismissing him as petty Alvaro. He stammers, asking if Settle is referring to the Dragonstone Kingdom. Alvaro then reveals the true scope of their ambition: to eventually build a massive organization and force the entire kingdom to submit to them. Settle leans forward, his hands clasped and a confident, predatory grin spreading across his face. He declares that with this plan, even the arrogant Barank adventurers who look down on him will have no choice but to show him respect. Under the night sky, a large, stately building stands as a center of authority. Inside, a man in a white suit stands before Settle, who sits at an imposing desk. Settle states that his purpose in this country is to correct its evils. The man, Alvaro, echoes the word, questioning what he means by evil. Alvaro begins to explain the nation's situation. He gestures, describing a capital blessed with rare ores, excellent weapons, and rich dungeons, but he narrows his eyes, noting a significant drawback to this prosperity. He elaborates on the system. All ore obtained within the dungeons must be delivered to the state. Furthermore, a special permit is required to even enter the middle and lower levels where the valuable ore is found. Settle listens, his expression hardening. For adventurers, this permit is only granted after years of service to the Kinsekai Guild, delivering vast quantities of or to prove their loyalty and trustworthiness. This restrictive system creates immense hardship for merchants and miners who lack deep connections. They lament how difficult it is to find permitted adventurers and how the requirements are far too demanding. Settle interjects, revealing there is more to the story. He explains that the Dragon Kingdom soldiers also venture deep into the dungeons for training and to secure ore, which is then sold exclusively at the nation's rare stone market. He turns to Alvaro, pointing out that this is the first time any of that monopolized or has reached the general market. He asks if Alvaro agrees that this is a terrible injustice. Settle's gaze is sharp as he concludes that this inequality must be corrected. Alvaro enthusiastically agrees, throwing his arms wide and declaring that the dungeons should be open for anyone to enter freely. Settle clenches a fist, adding that the ore should belong to whoever finds it. Their shared sentiment erupts in a triumphant laughter. With a fierce grin, Settle reveals their true intention. They will be the ones to monopolize it all. He explained to Alvaro that for their monopoly plan to succeed, they needed people. Fortunately, he knew there were countless adventurers, blacksmiths, and merchants who were dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. With a surge of ambition, he declared his intent to gather them all into a massive organization and become the new ruler of the capital, Lapis. Their plotting was cut short as a door swung open behind them. A voice called out, and both men turned in surprise. A man whose face was wrapped in bandages burst into the room, shouting for Settle. He frantically introduced himself as the leader of a group called Excalibur, much to Settle's visible annoyance. The bandaged man continued his plea, explaining that when they announced to the guild branch that they would be taking over, they were fiercely rebuffed. He gestured to his companion, a dark-haired man being held by the collar, and seethed that he would never forgive those women. In a sudden explosion of fury, Settle grabbed the dark-haired man and slammed his head onto a nearby table, shattering the glasses resting there. The three intruders stood in stunned silence. The bandaged leader tried to assert his status, declaring that he was an SS rank member of the guild and that his group had the authority to follow the top brass. Settle turned his back, clenching his fist in frustration as he wondered aloud how things had come to this. The bandaged man admitted he didn't know. Alvaro attempted to placate Settle, reminding him that even the top members of an S-rank guild earned their positions through past achievements. His companion, having recovered, pleaded with Settle, asking if he would avenge them. Settle turned to face the group once more, his expression grim. He confirmed that was his intention, stating they had smeared mud on his face. The adventurers looked relieved. As they turned to leave, Settle stopped them, telling them to wait. He demanded to know what kind of opponents they had faced. Behind him, Alvaro offered a quiet word of caution, warning Settle not to misjudge the people with whom he was about to pick a fight. He listened as the bandaged warrior described his assailants, a young girl and a brown-haired receptionist. The warrior insisted that they were no heroes, spitting the words with frustration. A confident smirk spread across his face. He assured the defeated party that he had a plan to corner their opponents and would emerge victorious. They were to leave everything to him. Meanwhile, in the Diamante Kingdom, a king clad in regal furs gazed out from his castle, his thoughts preoccupied with the matter of the court adventurers. His advisor, Avon, reported that a great number of adventurers had flowed into the royal capital, sparking calls among the people to establish a new system of control. The king stroked his beard, pondering how the citizens truly felt about the situation. Avon confirmed the king's unspoken concern. Many were opposed to the idea, unable to accept it on an intuitive level. The king grunted in somber acknowledgement. This sentiment was not confined to the nobility. A crowd of citizens protested, demanding that the court adventurers be recognized, believing it necessary to control the increasing number of adventurers. The king considered the delicate balance currently maintained between the divine bloodline and divine protection. To him, this push by the Adventurers Association was nothing short of an act of aggression against the state. He turned back to his advisor, remarking that the supporters of this new system did not understand its true nature. He then asked Avon directly if the court was truly considering the creation of state-recognized adventurers. Avon confirmed that, according to the rumors, that was indeed the case. The king's expression hardened at the implication, adventurers who would be exclusively loyal to the court. His mind drifted back to a dark chapter in their history. 100 years prior, a similar system had been created, and it had led the nation to ruin, a fact most of the populace no longer knew. He mused that even adventurers from neutral nations serve his country, yet this dangerous idea was resurfacing. His advisor, Avon, stood before him, explaining the current political landscape. The Adventurers Guild, he noted, maintained a stance of neutrality. For them to side with any one country would be an act of rebellion. While acting for the sake of others was a good deed, this strict neutrality was, in itself, a problem. He continued, clarifying that to quell public dissatisfaction, the issuance of quests was recognized by all nations. This system granted adventurers the right to undertake these tasks, providing a necessary outlet for their skills and ambitions. For quests that required a significant amount of time to complete, Avon added, a form of exclusive contract did exist. The king listened with his eyes closed, absorbing the information with a quiet grunt of acknowledgement. He opened his eyes, a thoughtful expression crossing his features. There were, he mused silently, adventurers who were quite skilled with their words. Now seated at his desk, the king considered the situation. The true architect of this political maneuver was not yet visible. He decided it was best to wait and observe for the time being. Avon pressed the point, warning that discontent was already brewing among the people of the capital, raising the possibility of riots. Stroking his beard, the king remained resolute, stating they would wait to see if their opponents would reveal their true intentions. Only then would he make his judgment. Bowing in acceptance, Avon shifted topics. He had come to report on the matter of the antenna. The king, now holding a small, star-tipped wand, asked if it was about time for it to reach the Heroes Guild. Avon confirmed that it was, then curiously asked if the king had remembered because he'd seen his own beard. In the world of combat, every martial art is built upon the principle of the critical distance and timing between opponents. Understanding this principle is what makes evasion possible. Elsewhere, the dismissed official, Holless, came to a sudden, chilling realization. The antenna was an item that could generate an overwhelmingly superior Maya. If he could wield such a thing freely, he would be unstoppable. The king of Diamante, seated with his advisor Avon, considers the situation with Holless. He reflects that the dismissed official had trampled on both justice and evil, but decides it is acceptable to give him a toy that is too much for him to handle. He then turns his attention to other matters, asking Avon for a report from the Merchant Association. The king decides to observe the situation firsthand by visiting Lavis, the town nearest the capital, concluding that it is the best way to avoid the danger of stray bullets. His expression hardens with resolve. He internally acknowledges that as long as the divine bloodline divides them, he cannot pursue the adventurers any further. It is a weakness he must not reveal as king. Meanwhile, in a different location, Luster and Rammel gaze upward, their hair blowing in the wind. Rammel lets out a cry of pure astonishment. Before them stands a colossal, futuristic tower crowned with an immense, satellite-like dish, dwarfing the surrounding forest. Ramel shouts in awe at its sheer size. She remarks that she says it every time, but she can't help it because it's so big. Ramel muses that it must have been a huge undertaking for the Diamante soldiers to transport it in pieces, but Luster clarifies that it has been treated with weight reduction magic. Deity approaches the two women, adjusting his gear. Ramel asks if he was sleeping underground in pieces. He confirms it, explaining that he could manage a one-man operation that way without assembling the entire capital, and wonders how far he can push his capabilities now that he is in a perfect state. Ramel then asks what he plans to use such a massive structure for. Just then, Ellie and Tyeris arrive carrying large stacks of documents, announcing their arrival to their master. The group gathers around a large open crate, revealing rows of identical, rectangular devices packed neatly inside. Deity simply acknowledges the delivery. Luster kneels and picks up one of the items, asking what it is. Deity identifies it as a communication magic tool and warns her not to wave it around, as they are about to begin a test. He examined the small, handheld device, questioning how something so compact could be used with a massive communication building. His companions gathered around, with Ellie remarking that this level of miniaturization was their usual brand of incredible technology. As Tyeris peered intently at the device, Deity asked what was wrong. Luster explained her curiosity, noting that the technology itself was simple enough to be replicated by a local workshop, which made its internal structure all the more intriguing. Ramel reacted with surprise to this information. Deity then clarified that the main communication processing system was located back in his room. He held up the device to illustrate, describing the main system as a cube of about that size. Tyeris elaborated on its inner workings, explaining that the device doesn't use magic power directly. Instead, a specialized panel golem for generating magic is positioned beneath a main cube, a fact that Deity suddenly realized. Hearing this, Ramel asked if a panel golem was a type of monster golem. Deity confirmed her suspicion, and Tyeris added that it was surprisingly unexpected for the master to have such profound knowledge of monster golems. Ellie then detailed the process. The monster's body naturally amplifies magic power, which is then channeled to the main cube, enabling communication through the antenna. Her explanation sparked excitement in Ramel, who realized they could use the device for propaganda without expending their own magic or relying on costly magic tools. She remarked that this was quite different from the golems their master typically employed. Luster interjected, noting that while the master's sword is free, breaking one of these panel golems would incur a cost, suggesting it could serve as an emergency wallet. Deity sternly warned her not to break it, reminding them they only had 100 prototypes. Ramel meekly agreed as Luster began to call out to someone. With the device activated, Luster asked Ramel for Lungia's number, which she provided as 009. After pressing the assigned numbers, Luster held the device to her ear and asked if anyone could hear her, but was met only with silence, leaving Deity to look on in confusion. He watches as Lungia explains the device's function, pointing to a lamp that shouldn't be pressed. As he processes this, Ramel puffs her cheeks in annoyance, clutching her own device. Without another word, Lungia dashes off, announcing she's heading to their destination. Her sudden departure causes Ramel to shout in protest, while Lungia herself freezes mid-stride, her face a mask of pure, wide-eyed shock. The tension breaks as Ramel bursts into laughter, mocking Lungia for being so easily startled. Deity sighs, remarking on her childishness as she points out the call hasn't even ended yet. Regaining her composure, Lungia fields a question from Deity about the device's range. She speculates that it should connect anywhere within the capital, Lapis, but admits she is uncertain about the specifics of the antenna's configuration. To resolve this uncertainty, he turns to Ellie, explaining his plan to gather testers to properly gauge the device's capabilities. Ellie agrees, noting that she will handle the distribution. She adds excitedly that this will allow her to speak with Nasha and the other children around the clock. At the prospect, the small animal-eared girl erupts with joy, holding a device in each hand. Ellie sternly reminds her not to run, her sharp tone cutting through the excitement. The girl rushes over to a group of other children, including Aderica, excitedly showing off the device and declaring that now they can all talk to Ellie whenever they want. Ellie clarifies the device's limitations to the assembled children. She explains that because there is no magic present either inside or outside the dungeon, communication from the palace is impossible. However, she assures them it will work anywhere else. Nearby, Luster elaborates on the technology for the curious animal-eared girl. She explains that enabling a non-magic user to perform the equivalent of communication magic required them to obtain a hyper-precise, specialized version for ultra-long-range use, a feat that necessitated significant training. The girl marvels at the implications, realizing that anyone can use it, even without magic. Luster confirms this, noting that even high-performance magic tools struggle to function within dungeons. She recalls that a similar system existed at the World Conference headquarters, but its usage procedures were incredibly cumbersome. She and her companions discussed the new devices. Ellie explained that since they were creating a communication infrastructure, laws would be necessary. Luster expressed her admiration, noting that their master had even created the legal framework for his golem technology. The young Beastkin girl listened eagerly, exclaiming that she couldn't wait. Elsewhere, a gloved hand picked up one of the sleek, white communication devices from a table where 3 were laid out. The device was brought before an authoritative man, who examined it with a skeptical frown. He questioned if such a thin slate could truly be a communication magic tool. An aide confirmed that it was. The aide, Alvaro, continued his report, explaining that the hero's artisan had produced about 100 units. They had gathered testers, and the guild had then purchased the devices from those testers. Holding one of the devices, the guild leader mused aloud, wondering if they had been tracked. He quickly dismissed the thought, reasoning that with only 3 devices in their possession, they would likely go unnoticed. As he considered the situation, his office door opened. A young receptionist entered, announcing her presence as she stepped inside. She approached his desk and informed him that several letters had arrived. He stared at her intently, asking if there was anything important among them. His intense stare twisted into a lecherous grin as he leaned far over the desk, his gaze fixed not on the letters, but on her. "Let me see," he demanded. The receptionist flushed, visibly uncomfortable and disturbed by his blatant stare. He snatched the letters from her grasp. "All right, you can go," he said dismissively. The receptionist quietly acknowledged and turned to leave. Just as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Tonight," he commanded, his face unseen, "come to my room." The receptionist froze, her eyes wide with shock and dread. She stands before the adventurer's desk, flanked by a well-dressed man, and asks what he means. The adventurer, Settle, simply states that the matter is already decided. He leans forward with a menacing grin, reminding her of the great expense he covered for her father's medical treatment. He asks who she thinks is paying for it all. As the receptionist apologizes, her face flushed with shame, Settle tells her that words are not enough. She is to show her sincerity to him at night. His threat hangs heavy in the air. Settle's head is bowed, his body trembling with a suppressed intensity, while the well-dressed man looks on with a detached smirk. The receptionist's hand, clutching a cloth, shakes uncontrollably. From an adjacent room, an unseen observer remarks on Settle's excellent performance, adding that his father is a fool as well. The receptionist, tears welling in her eyes, realizes his scheme. She understands he is trapping her with a massive debt, just as one might weaken a monster from afar before claiming the kill. Settle confirms her thoughts, stating it's her own fault for lacking knowledge and wisdom. He mentions that this directive comes from headquarters itself. The well-dressed man, Alvaro, then turns and reports that the person behind Settle, someone named Pastel, has already grasped the information regarding the new communication devices, noting how quickly it was done. He continues his report to a silhouetted figure, explaining that while headquarters officers have the privilege of using the communication devices, they desire the portable models. He proposes that of the 3 available units, one should be given to Pastel, a suggestion that is met with silent approval. With the matter settled, Settle leans back, smugly remarking that things are getting interesting, especially what will happen at night. Alvaro adds that this will surely improve Settle's reputation. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, Ellie browses the shelves of a well-stocked apothecary. Her eyes land on an ornate bottle, which she identifies as a high-rank potion. As she examines the bottle, Luster approaches from behind, asking if she is planning to venture deep into a dungeon. Ellie turns to face her and replies that it is just for camping. She finds Luster sitting alone on the edge of a stone fountain, her head bowed in thought. Approaching her, Ellie declares with conviction that she will protect the peace of all the cute girls in town. Her small, winged companion peeks out from behind her, questioning what she's talking about, and pointing out that she is usually the one who disrupts the peace. Luster voices her hesitation, reminding Ellie that their plan is not yet ready, and that they still have to contend with Settle and the recent trouble he stirred up. Ellie's expression transforms into one of manic intensity. She declares that she will utterly crush all of their enemies' hopes. Inside a grand building, Holless presents a complex mechanical box. The animal-eared girl marvels at it, identifying it as a copy machine. Holless confirms, explaining that with sufficient paper and ink, it can produce endless duplicates of the same image, as demonstrated by the drawings of a small, bear-like creature emerging from the device. He explains to Lungia and the girl that he wanted to test the device within the palace walls. Lungia examines the freshly printed sheet, acknowledging that while methods like letterpress printing exist, they are incomparably slow next to this new machine. As Lungia considers the implications, Iderica cheerfully inspects the machine, asking about its inner workings. When Holless hesitates, she points to the drawing and asks what it depicts. He cryptically suggests she'll understand soon enough. The answer comes not from him, but from the animal-eared girl, who excitedly holds up the drawing. She exclaims that it's a picture of Iderica and herself, whom she calls Ochan. Iderica looks on, momentarily speechless. She takes the drawing from the golem's hand, her expression twisting into a strained smile as she mutters to herself. While she contemplates the drawing, Holless examines the paper itself, noting its high quality and the quick-drying ink. He remarks that the paper available in town was somewhat weak. Iderica explains that she had prepared both the paper and a special pen for the demonstration. The golem's mechanical hand is shown deftly using the pen, its movements swift and precise as it creates the original drawing with ease. Watching it work, Iderica explains to the other girl that the tool is called a ballpoint pen in the language of the Great Summoning Era, adding that even a golem master is capable of creating such an item. Holless exhales, a wave of relief washing over him. He confesses that not having access to these simple tools has been a significant source of stress. Ederica remarks with a deadpan expression that his time serving in the royal castle must have been hellish. With the demonstration concluded, he turns to leave. He asks Ederica to inform him of any issues with the prototype machine. She agrees readily, warmly inviting him to come and visit again anytime. He waved goodbye, promising to return once he had crafted something new. As he departed, Ederica called out a reminder that the palace was not his personal laboratory. Watching him go, Luster admitted to Ederica that while each new creation was thrilling, the constant excitement was almost too much for her heart to bear. Ederica simply smiled, enjoying the spectacle. Now outside the palace grounds, Holless consulted a note, murmuring to himself about the other places he needed to visit. His thoughts were interrupted by the sight of a bustling street market, where two adventurers were heartily enjoying some local food. A sudden growl from his stomach made the decision for him. He decided he ought to get something to eat as well. As he approached with his meal, he noticed two men struggling with a cart. One complained that it wouldn't budge. Holless, seeing their struggle, casually told them not to worry about it. The men looked up confused. One, with a headband, asked what he meant. The other, a muscular man with spiky hair, angrily demanded to know how they were supposed to secure their magical tool. Taking a bite of his food, Holless calmly asked what they were doing with his cart. The man with the headband confirmed it was his. The man with the headband burst into laughter, asking if Holless really thought they were just going to take it. The spiky-haired man added that of course they wouldn't, offering to sell it back to him instead. Holless stood frozen in disbelief. He looked down at the few coins in his palm, utterly stunned. He wondered aloud if this was truly all the money he had. He calmly faces the men blocking his path. The one with the mohawk points a thumb at himself and declares they are from the S-rank guild, Excalibur. The larger, spiky-haired man smirks, asking if Holless has anything good to sell them, a clear threat. Holless silently identifies them as adventurers. He questions them, asking if they mistake him for some merchant's novice. The mohawked man scoffs, retorting that if a newcomer like him managed to deal with an S-rank guild, then he must be nothing more than a pretty face. The man's patience wears thin. He roars for Holless to hurry up, declaring this a lesson in how the world works as he draws back a fist. Behind them, another thug begins to rifle through the contents of the cart. The fist flies forward but stops dead in the air, inches from his face, held by an invisible barrier. The thug's eyes widen in disbelief, sweat beading on his brow. Unfazed, Holless glances toward the spiky-haired leader and remarks that his subordinate seems to have grown quite rusty. In the next instant, the mohawked man is violently thrown backward, tumbling to the ground. His companion with the bowl cut cries out in shock, demanding to know what just happened. He stands over the fallen man, who groans, unable to move. Holless states coolly that he is not so naive as to play along with their little trial, adding that he has no interest in their twisted sense of justice. A faint, dismissive smile touches his lips. He tells them it's pathetic, they don't even realize they are being treated like trash. The spiky-haired leader can only stare, speechless at the turn of events. He turns his back on them, already walking away. He tells them to consider themselves forgotten, leaving the stunned leader and his fallen subordinate behind. His expression hardens as he walks. He thinks to himself that such lowlifes have no right to tread in the domain of adventurers with their filthy boots. With a weary sigh, he stands over the defeated men. The entire group now lies groaning on the street, effortlessly dispatched. He looked down at the man he had effortlessly thrown to the ground. The thug, sweating and trembling, stared up in disbelief and demanded to know who he was. His response was calm and direct. Holless. Seeing their continued confusion, he clarified for them, stating that he was the hero's master. The other thugs could only watch, their expressions a mixture of shock and fear. He then posed a question to the group, asking if they were afraid of him. He offered to let the incident go, reasoning that they were no match for someone named Pastel anyway. His words only brought more confusion. The leader scrambled to his feet, shouting that he didn't understand. He declared that Holless, who hadn't even been scared of the Demon King, was just like them. Raising a communication device, the thug boasted that their S-rank guild was the greatest. As the man continued his rant, Holless turned away, holding a similar device. He stated coolly that he had no intention of forgiving them for being robbers. He elaborated, explaining that the unforgivable part was their impersonation of adventurers, acting as tyrants among the people. To him, he concluded internally, that was the most inappropriate way to represent what an adventurer should be. His judgment enraged the thugs. Silence, the leader roared. You're the ones who should be quiet. Before the thugs could act, a squad of armored city guard arrived. Their captain pointed decisively at the group. Officers of Excalibur, he announced loudly. You're under arrest for assault and robbery against the hero's master. The guards moved in swiftly. The leader pleaded for them to wait, promising to apologize, but his words were ignored. As he was being restrained, another thug cursed, realizing with dawning horror just who had summoned their downfall. With the impersonator subdued, Holless addresses the city guards. He advises them that in an age of communication devices, it is best to avoid careless remarks, then orders them to take the men away. The guards acknowledge and comply immediately. He then turns to the guard captain, remarking how useful his communication device proved to be. The captain agrees, noting with a hint of amusement that the culprits were certainly energetic. The captain's expression sobers as he offers a formal apology, explaining that the Settle Federation has been causing a great deal of trouble lately. He elaborates that while international law is supposed to prevent such harm, the sheer number of adventurers filling the town makes it difficult for high-ranking guilds to intervene effectively. As he listens, Holless reflects on the past arrest of the guild's executives. The failure to control them resulted in severe economic losses, and the consequences of that time still linger. He muses that a better balance should have been sought. The captain's voice cuts through his thoughts, admitting it's a painful subject. He adds, somewhat improperly, that he was actually a little glad that Holless was the victim this time, as it forced the issue. Holless remains silent, processing the comment. Deciding the matter is concluded, Holless turns to leave, stating he must get back to his duties. The captain quickly calls out, asking him to wait, as there is more he wishes to discuss. He pauses, listening as the captain asks if he is aware of the discussions to establish a court adventurer branch at the Adventurers Association headquarters. Holless confirms he has heard of it, which the captain notes will make the conversation easier. The captain explains that while the Tiamat Kingdom's progress on the matter is slow, the association headquarters is pushing it. Furthermore, there are movements by the court adventurers within the country, led by a man named Settle. Holless immediately questions if he means Settle of the infamous Settle Federation. The name gives him pause as he considers the implications of the association headquarters' involvement. He thanks the captain for the information, acknowledging that he now understands why the captain felt it was important to tell him. The captain expresses his gratitude in return. In a quiet part of the city, a simmering rage is directed at someone named Pastel. Inside a nearby building, the source of that anger becomes clear. Settle, shirtless, paces with a dark expression on his face. His impatience grows. He rattles a door handle and shouts, demanding to know how long that woman intends to make him wait. He throws the door open to find a terrified man on the other side. Settle roars his own name, lunging forward, as the man, Alvaro, flinches back and stammers his identity. Moments later, the two are seated. Alvaro, looking distressed, covers his face while Settle demands to know what he wants at such a busy time. Alvaro delivers the news. The woman they were holding has escaped. Settle's face contorts with fury as he shouts, demanding to know what he just said. His rage boils over. He questions aloud if she abandoned her own father just to save herself, snarling at the thought of her actions. Several days pass. At the Adventurers Association headquarters, Holless stands with Ellie and a guild receptionist, examining a large notice board. The receptionist turns from the board and calls out cheerfully to Holless, addressing him as Big Brother. Her greeting is cut short by a heavy thud. A large sack is thrown into the room, and from it tumbles a bound Nasha. The receptionist cries out her name in utter shock. She rushes forward, embracing the young girl, Nasha, with tears in her eyes. She exclaims that it's been a long time, and Nasha, overjoyed, returns the hug, agreeing wholeheartedly. Her relief quickly turns to concern as she holds Nasha at arm's length, asking if it's safe for her to run given her heart condition. Nasha beams, flexing a small fist, and declares that she has somehow been cured. The receptionist stares in disbelief, while in the background, Holless and Ellie watch the reunion unfold. Holless turns to Ellie, questioning if this means the master healed Nasha's injuries at the same time he treated his own. Ellie confirms it, suggesting they should offer thanks to the goddess of infant care on his behalf. Holless seems utterly baffled by the idea. The receptionist tells Nasha that her presence alone purifies the air, but she'll clean it up regardless. As they speak, Holless observes them, finally understanding that this woman must be the sister Nasha had mentioned before. The receptionist, Risha, begins to explain their situation. She reveals that their father is gravely ill and that she had been working at the guild as one of Settle's subordinates to support it. She continues, her voice strained, explaining that Settle had been extorting money from them for the treatment costs and that they are still paying for their father's ongoing care. Holless listens, his expression hardening at the revelation. As Risha finishes her story, Ellie suddenly uncorks a high-rank potion and douses a startled Nasha from head to toe. Holless watches the scene with a deadpan expression while Risha cheers, calling Ellie amazing. The moment is interrupted by the arrival of a new group. A man with shoulder-length blonde hair and a confident air leads them, looking around and remarking that the place seems rather shabby for a guild branch office. He turns his sharp gaze on the room's occupants, a smirk playing on his lips. He introduces himself as Pastel, an officer from the main headquarters, and states that they will all be following his orders from now on. Pastel makes his first declaration, announcing that everyone in this guild branch is to be placed under the command of the Settle unit. Risha stares at him, her face a mask of shock and horror. She stared in disbelief, her voice sharp as she demanded to know what he was doing so suddenly. Before she could get an answer, Holless moved to stand between her and the official Pastel. He calmly asked the man to identify himself. Pastel, however, seemed more interested in the shabby magic Holless had just used, musing that it was a decent greeting from the headquarters elite and a display of their true power. He identified himself as Holless, adding that Pastel might understand if he mentioned he was the hero's master. The official merely uttered a non-committal "I see," seemingly unimpressed by the revelation that Holless had subdued a gigant despite not being an adventurer. He then turned his back on Holless, walking away slightly as he made a proposition. Register as an adventurer right now and join his unit. He condescendingly offered to provide a better uniform than the one Holless was currently wearing. He flatly refused, stating he had no intention of returning to being an adventurer. Pastel countered, his tone unyielding, declaring that it made no difference. The adventurers' community was no different from the guild headquarters, which meant Holless was now his subordinate. He framed Holless's refusal as a rejection of his invitation, accusing him of ignoring the adventurer's duty to quell public unrest. Pastel claimed that Holless, a man strong enough to defeat a guy gigant, was only using his power for his own selfish gain. He then turned to a group of adventurers who had gathered nearby, asking if they didn't also think Holless was being selfish. After a moment of tense silence, Holless's composure finally broke. He snapped at Pastel, demanding to know what was with his attitude, explaining that one of the reasons the Adventurers Guild was created was for travelers with power to exist unhindered by the authority of nations or religions. Their purpose, he declared, was to explore the unknown and protect freedom. As an official, Pastel was the very antithesis of what an adventurer should be. The official's face contorted with rage. "Have you forgotten what it means to be free?" he snarled, dismissing Holless's words as grandstanding. He proclaimed that in this day and age, adventurers were nothing more than cogs in the social machine. The other adventurers looked on, their expressions hardening in agreement. He continued his lecture, explaining that because the guild headquarters manages the gears of the world itself belongs to the excellent. He scoffed at the idea that an organization managing a mere 200,000 adventurers out of a global population of 2 billion could do anything but make a mockery of the world. In response, Holless shot forward, grabbing the official by his collar. As Pastel sputtered in outrage, questioning if he was insulting the hero's community, Holless clarified his position. He stated that he likes adventurers, but he despises the guild headquarters precisely because people like Pastel are in charge. He shoved Pastel back, asserting that adventurers are meant to be truly free. He declared that he had no interest in the official's particular brand of ideology. The official's face contorted with rage. He warned Holless not to forget his place or get carried away, snarling that he was nothing more than a commoner. His threat was met with an amused smirk. Holless found the insult interesting, repeating the words back to him. Clutching his coat, Pastel declared that as a headquarters official, he wouldn't deign to get his own hands dirty. Despite his words, the official lunged forward, seizing Holless by the collar himself, much to the shock of his subordinates. He claimed to understand Holless perfectly now, demanding to know what he was doing. He tightened his grip, telling Holless to relax. He announced his intention to teach him a lesson with a single punch, drawing back his fist. Before the blow could land, Holless spoke, his expression calm. He promised to deliver a strike that would leave nothing but pain behind. The official's eyes widened in shock. In an instant, Holless's fist connected squarely with Pastel's jaw. The force of the blow sent the official flying backward, out through the open doorway. Holless watched him go, issuing a final warning. "I'm in this town. Don't get too carried away." He stood his ground, his expression unreadable, as the surrounding adventurers stared in stunned silence. The official, Pastel, staggered back, his face a mask of disbelief and pain, while his associate looked on in horror. His attention then shifted from the reeling official to Ellie, who was shielding Nasha and Iderica from the scene. He questioned what she was doing, and she stammered in response, her voice trembling as she insisted she couldn't allow the children to witness such a disgraceful display from adults. As Holless listened, his expression hardening, Ellie continued, mentioning something about the court adventurers of the Dragonstone Kingdom. Internally, he seethed, thinking how utterly ridiculous this all was. Inside a stately building, the official known as Pastel slams his hand on a desk, demanding an update from Settle. He wants to know the status of the court adventurer plan. Settle explains that while they're gathering adventurers who agree with their cause, their momentum has stalled. He attributes this to the recent raid on the S-rank guild Excalibur and the seizure of Holless's assets. Pastel's face contorts with frustration as he mutters, "Him again." His angry gaze reveals Holless standing silently in the background. Unaware of Holless's presence, Settle asks Pastel if the hero did something to him, suggesting that turning a blind eye to the minor crimes of fellow adventurers would be beneficial. Holless looks on, his expression one of utter shock. Settle passionately rejects the idea, declaring that now that the Demon King has been subjugated, the Adventurers Association that controls the world cannot be allowed to escape accountability. Pastel's eyes gleam with ambition. He proclaims that if the plan succeeds, his name will be etched into history as the first step for the Diamante Dragonstone Kingdom. Elsewhere, the maid Tyeris pours tea, reflecting on the difficult time her master has had. She recalls that Ellie had disliked Pastel for trying to get close to him. The scene shifts to a parlor where Deity sits with Tyeris and Rammel. He explains that he had been advising Settle to get the Dragonstone Kingdom's association branch under his command, hoping it would lead to him being recognized as the hero's subordinate. However, he admits Settle's methods have been too blunt. While snacking, Rammel scoffs at the entire concept. The idea of a court adventurer or adventurers ruling the world is nothing but a joke to her. Tyeris listens quietly, sipping her tea. Deity continues his explanation, stating that Holless has caused major incidents in the past. He theorizes that because his current activities are being evaluated, Holless is now desperately trying to expand the Adventurers Association's authority. Rammel recalls the major incident from 4 years ago during the Demon King's subjugation, noting the terrible damage it caused. Tyeris adds that information about it is coming in, though it seems there's an effort to suppress it. Deity agrees, his expression darkening as he thinks back on the horrible memory. His thoughts drifted back 4 years to the Demon King Countermeasure Conference. Even then, it was widely known that the Demon King possessed an ability to dominate men. Many heroes who had challenged her had already been enthralled by this power. A plan was put forth. The association's own staff would be equipped with magic items that provided resistance to mental abnormalities. The prevailing belief was that this would be enough to escape the Demon King's influence, and so the plan was put into action. A formidable force of adventurers, including the man who would later lead Excalibur, gathered for the mission. The association mobilized its finest artisans and magic tool technicians to mass-produce the resistance items, while simultaneously using substantial monetary rewards to recruit a large number of high-ranking adventurers. Dozens of A-rank adventurers, equipped with these newly crafted items, launched an assault on the Demon King's capital, the front line of the war. However, their arrival was no surprise. The Demon Queen was aware of their approach and awaited them with her army. Their leader roared with conviction, declaring that this battle would lead to the Demon King's subjugation and their own ascension to hero status. He urged his comrades to charge forward, though one reminded him not to get too far ahead. After battling through the demonic ranks, the adventurers reached a large, imposing door. Their leader bellowed a challenge, demanding the Demon King show herself. He turned to his wavering companion, telling him not to be afraid. He confidently declared that with their magic items, they were protected, and that he would be the one to take the Demon King's head. In that instant, the Demon Queen materialized before them, surrounded by an aura of dark power. An adventurer's sword slipped from his grasp, clattering against the stone floor as they all stared up at her. Her gaze fell upon them, a subtle, knowing smile on her lips. In a moment, the adventurer's bravado vanished, replaced by utter infatuation. Their eyes turned to hearts as they became completely captivated. Everything, she realized, had been enthralled. In a well-appointed room, Deity, Rammel, and Tyeris discussed the past. Deity notes that Pastel was only 19 when he executed that disastrous plan. Rammel, lounging on the sofa, remarks that it was fortunate the consequences didn't spread across the entire world. She holds up a newspaper from that time, its headline proclaiming the great feats of the heroes. Rammel explains that many countries were suffering then and craved good news, so the heroes' activities were reported as major successes. Deity adds grimly that due to the mission's failure, the enthralled adventurers were transformed into monsters by the Demon Queen's magic, and the heroes were then blamed for subjugating their former comrades, a fate he deems far too cruel. He then turns to Rammel with a question that has been bothering him. Where did she get the design documents for the mental resistance magic items? With a knowing wink, she replies that they are for a high-performance item, seemingly effective even against the Demon Queen, and confirms that it can be mass-produced. Leaning back on the sofa with his arms crossed, Deity admits that he was curious about that as well. Tyeris, standing nearby, agrees, stating that the origin of such a powerful design is indeed incomprehensible. Deity's thoughts drift back to his time working in the capital. He recalls hearing discussions about mass-producing mental abnormality resistance items and that various talented individuals had been gathered for the project. However, he never learned the source of the design documents. His reverie is broken by Rammel's voice, asking if he didn't think Pastel's actions were a hindrance when the news first broke. Running a hand through his hair in frustration, Deity admits that the entire situation was completely unexpected for him. Tyeris, who had been listening quietly, offers her perspective. She had always thought that magic items were meant to be used to resolve tragic situations. Rammel turns to her, repeating her words with a questioning tone. Tragic situations? The maid elaborates, asking Rammel if she hasn't seen many such tragedies herself, having fought on the front lines. Rammel's expression becomes somber as she looks away, quietly affirming that she has indeed. Her words trigger a dark memory. The Demon Queen stands amidst flames, holding an enthralled female warrior. A chilling thought echoes in Rammel's mind. The Demon Queen cannot kill men, for they are her pawns, but women are useless to her and must be eliminated immediately. The memory shifts to the grim reality of that order. Rammel recalls the battlefield, littered with the bodies of those who were simply killed. There were so many. Continuing their discussion, Deity mused that to go to a place like the Demon Territory, a magic item to protect one's mind would certainly be necessary. Tyeris, listening intently, agreed, adding that she had assumed such items would need to be distributed. He continued, his voice low and serious, suggesting that someone must have provided the information specifically to cause a major incident. At this, Rammel, who had been quiet, let out a sharp gasp. The memory of the items, the magic talismans and medals that were actually distributed, flashed through Rammel's mind, giving her an unsettling feeling. Tyeris voiced her own suspicions, remarking that the whole situation seemed far too convenient. Deity's thoughts turned to Pastel, who had once stated that underestimating the Demon King was not the only reason for their failure, implying a deeper cause. He wondered aloud what Pastel's next move would be. As Rammel ate, Tyeris sipped her drink, and noted that no matter what, he always seemed to involve himself with the hero community. Hieris elaborated on Pastel's potential plan. She explained that while adventurers normally register and have their civic rights suspended to ensure neutrality, her group was an exception. As adventurers of the Dragonstone Nation, they were what Pastel likely considered court adventurers. Rammel understood immediately. This meant their group was the closest to achieving whatever goal he had in mind. Leaning back with his arms crossed, Deity sighed, realizing that no matter what, they would inevitably have to make contact with him. Several days later, from a nearby building, Ellie peered through a spyglass, carefully observing the residence where Deity was staying. She lowered the spyglass with a faint smile, remarking on someone's unflagging energy before announcing she was stepping out. At that moment, Deity and Luster emerged from the building below, Luster holding a scroll, much to Deity's apparent surprise. Luster noticed his distraction and playfully asked if he was looking at another cute girl, offering to lend him something. Flustered, Deity stammered a denial. He silently peers through a spyglass, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Rammel looks on with wide-eyed shock, questioning if he, too, has taken up spying like Ellie. Without a word, he offers the spyglass to her, urging her to see for herself. Confused, she takes it and raises it to her eye. Through the lens, she sees a man on a platform addressing a crowd, and she gasps in disbelief. Deity wonders aloud what he's up to, questioning if it is speech or some kind of performance. Rammel remarks that it certainly looks like he's trying to become a hero before any real discussion can happen. Days earlier, the groundwork for this moment was laid. An agitator spoke to the common folk, promising to get the court adventurer system approved, framing it as a necessary step, since the nobles and the church had failed to contribute to the demon subjugation efforts. Back in the present, the hero on the stage proclaims to the crowd that while the hero community defeated the demon lord, he himself lacks a grand residence in this remote land. His voice swells with manufactured rage as he shouts that this is unforgivable. He insists that it is only natural for a hero who saved the world to be granted a position befitting their accomplishments. He bellows, questioning if it isn't perfectly reasonable for a court adventurer to be given a central role in the nation's governance. As the crowd stirs, Pastel watches from a distance, a smug and satisfied smile on his face. From their perch, Rammel notes that the people seem to be accepting his words. Deity thinks to himself that the entire spectacle is designed to make the populace accept the idea of adventures approved by the state. Turning his attention to Rammel, he offers to explain the dangers of the situation if she'll allow him to organize his thoughts. She readily agrees, eagerly addressing him as master. He begins by asking if she knows that adventurers are traditionally considered neutral immigrants, without allegiance to any country. He then explains that the court adventurer system is simply a mechanism to force those independent individuals to work for the government. He praises Ellie's sharp observation. She had questioned why adventurers, who are meant to be neutral, would serve a specific country. Rammel, however, points out a flaw in this neutrality. It means the government can easily conceal information from them. Her expression brightens as she realizes Deity's point. Continuing his explanation, he calls the entire system malicious. He elaborates that it would be difficult for adventurers to defy a direct order from the Adventurers Association, and any information they gather would inevitably leak to the association, making it easy to plant spies. Rammel sighs, grasping the grim implications. He adds that there are further problems. Since adventurers are not citizens, they lack the civic consciousness to ensure their skills and know-how are passed down. There's also the high probability that they would be assigned dangerous and thankless jobs that citizens would refuse. Ellie processes this, summarizing that as a result, the quality of work would decline and valuable skills would not be passed on. Deity confirms her assessment, stating that this is just one example of the system's malevolence. Rammel quietly agrees, her expression grim. Meanwhile, Pastel reflects on his strategy. He sees his exploitation of the concept of adventurers as immigrants as a clever move for the nation's benefit. To him, using court adventurers is simply a wise decision. His machinations are in full effect as Settle addresses a crowd. The adventurer proclaims that while heroes save the world from divine punishment, there is a greater cause that transcends their domain. He declares that the powerful must ensure safety and security so that society can develop, allowing people to produce and consume without fear. Deity watches the scene unfold, his expression thoughtful. The crowd is stirred by his words. Voices rise, expressing discontent with the adventurers and merchants who have come to their country. They shout that the citizens of this nation must come first and that they have the right to the profits from their mines. Seizing the momentum, Settle roars that they are only getting the leftovers. He yells that it was they who mined the ore, clenching his fist in solidarity with his own declaration. He points directly into the crowd, his voice booming. He asks if it wasn't they who mined the ore, to be recognized for their work and to use what they've earned freely. He insists they must first obtain the status of court adventurers. If that were to happen, adventurers and citizens would become equals. But before Settle can continue, a pair of polished boots steps into view. A voice cuts through the noise. Settle. Be quiet. The adventurer whirls around, enraged. What did you say? As Deity's interruption hangs in the air, another man steps forward from the crowd, his expression a mask of cold fury. A nearby citizen recognizes him, shouting his name in disbelief. Avon. He comes to a stop before Pastel, who greets him with a condescending smile. Pastel gestures towards the stage and asks if Avon has some complaint about the ongoing speech. Avon remains silent, his gaze unwavering. Before he can answer, a woman with dark hair and glasses, Ellie, cuts in sharply. With her arms crossed, she declares that what they are hearing is utterly foolish, something far beyond a simple complaint. She positions herself between Avon and Pastel, creating a tense standoff that captures the crowd's attention. On the platform above, Settle can only stare, utterly baffled by this coordinated challenge to his authority. Avon's focus remains solely on the man on the stage. Pointing directly at him, he announces his decision. He has been thinking about it for some time, and now it is settled. Settle is hereby expelled from the all-world wind. The declaration hits Settle with the force of a physical blow, and he shouts in disbelief. Pastel turns to Avon, feigning confusion, and asks what he could possibly mean by such a statement. Avon calmly explains that he will not allow trouble to be brought upon the all-world wind that he himself created. He has nothing more to say to someone who would use its authority as a shield to pursue their own unknown ambitions. He continues his rebuke, stating that as long as the world upholds the divine journey, adventurers must remain adventurers. He accuses the Settle Alliance of fundamentally denying this truth. Settle grits his teeth, unable to form a response. Pastel then interjects, his voice smooth and calculating. He asks Avon if he truly believes that the world's greatest achievement, the subjugation of the Demon King, should be constrained by the nationality of a single, small country. His words give Avon pause. The man's stern expression softens into one of contemplation as he processes the argument. He murmurs to himself, acknowledging that he understands the logic being presented. He gazed out at a familiar building, the sight prompting a quiet reflection. It had been a long time. From the window beside him, a blonde-haired woman with her arms crossed broke the silence. She spoke his name, Avon, and asked if he had come to this town.